Right now, somewhere in the darkness beyond our solar system, a world waits that could change everything we know about life in the universe. Proxima b, an Earth-sized planet orbiting the closest star to our Sun, sits tantalizingly within what scientists call the habitable zone, a cosmic neighbor that might harbor conditions suitable for liquid water, perhaps even life itself. The discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community when astronomers confirmed its existence in 2016, proving that potentially habitable worlds exist right next door in cosmic terms, orbiting Proxima Centauri just 4.2 light-years away. Yet this apparent proximity masks a cruel deception. The distance to Proxima b represents one of the most insurmountable barriers humanity has ever contemplated. Tonight, we'll journey through the mathematics of impossibility, explore why our most advanced spacecraft move like snails compared to what interstellar travel demands, and confront the sobering reality that this nearest potentially habitable world might remain forever beyond our reach. If you're fascinated by the limits of human exploration and the vast scales that govern our universe, please like and subscribe. Let's begin this exploration of why reaching our closest exoplanetary neighbour may be the ultimate impossible dream. When we first hear that Proxima b lies 4.2 light-years away, the number itself seems almost manageable. After all, we routinely discuss galactic distances in thousands or millions of light-years. The Milky Way stretches 100,000 light-years from edge to edge. Our neighbouring galaxy Andromeda sits 2.5 million light-years distant. Against such cosmic immensity, 4.2 light-years sounds practically intimate, like living just down the street rather than across a continent. This numerical familiarity creates a dangerous illusion in our minds. We hear closest star system and imagine something achievable, something within the realm of possibility if we simply apply enough determination and technological prowess. The number 4.2 carries the weight of human scale, reminiscent of distances we traverse in our daily lives. We drive farther to visit family members, commercial aircraft fly longer routes without stopping. The digits themselves seem to whisper promises of accessibility that the underlying physics cannot possibly fulfill. But light-years operate on scales that dwarf human comprehension. A single light-year represents the distance light travels in an entire year, while moving at 300,000 kilometers every second. This velocity exceeds anything our intuition can grasp. Light moves so fast it could circle Earth's entire equator more than 7 times in a single heartbeat. Stretch that incomprehensible speed across 12 months of continuous travel, and you arrive at roughly 9.5 trillion kilometers. Multiply that staggering distance by 4.2 and you reach the true gulf separating us from Proxima b. To place this in perspective, consider that the distance from Earth to Neptune, our solar system's outermost major planet, measures approximately 4.5 billion kilometers. Proxima Centauri lies nearly 9,000 times farther away than Neptune. If we could somehow shrink the distance between Earth and Proxima Centauri to span the width of the continental United States, our entire solar system would fit within the length of a single city block. Every spacecraft humanity has ever launched, every world we've photographed up close, every destination our robotic explorers have reached exists within that single city block. Meanwhile, Proxima b waits on the opposite coast, separated by thousands of miles of empty highway in this scaled comparison. The star's apparent proximity becomes even more deceptive when we examine our cosmic neighbourhood. Within that 4.2 light-year radius, only 3 stellar systems exist. Proxima Centauri itself, along with its binary companions Alpha Centauri A and B. Beyond this tiny bubble of nearby stars, the next closest stellar systems lie considerably farther away. We inhabit a relatively sparse region of our galaxy, which means our nearest neighbour represents not just the closest option, but essentially the only remotely accessible target for humanity's first attempt at interstellar exploration. This deceptive proximity has shaped decades of scientific planning and captured public imagination worldwide. The closest possible destination for interstellar travel remains functionally unreachable, with any technology we currently possess or can reasonably envision developing within the foreseeable future. The cruel mathematics of cosmic distance ensure that what appears near on astronomical scales remains impossibly distant by any human measure. The discovery of Proxima b transformed our nearest stellar neighbour from merely the closest star into something far more compelling. In 2016, astronomers working with the European Southern Observatory announced they had detected subtle wobbles in Proxima Centauri's motion. These tiny gravitational tugs reveal the presence of an orbiting planet pulling on its parent star. Years of painstaking observations using sophisticated spectrographic equipment had finally confirmed what scientists had long hoped to find. The planet itself challenged many assumptions about what habitable worlds should look like. Proxima b completes its orbit once every 11.2 days, racing around its star at a distance of just 7.5 million kilometers. This places the planet far closer to its star than Mercury sits relative to our Sun. Yet this proximity doesn't condemn Proxima b to scorching temperatures, because Proxima Centauri belongs to a class of stars called red dwarfs. Red dwarfs burn much cooler and dimmer than our Sun, possessing only about 12% of the Sun's mass and roughly 1% of its luminosity. At its close orbital distance, Proxima b receives approximately 65% of the stellar energy that Earth receives from our Sun. This places the planet squarely within what astronomers call the habitable zone, that precious region around a star where liquid water could theoretically exist on a planetary surface. Mass estimates added to the scientific excitement surrounding the discovery. Proxima b appears to possess at least 1.3 times Earth's mass, suggesting a rocky composition rather than a gaseous giant like Jupiter or Saturn. This places the world firmly in the category of potentially terrestrial planets, worlds with solid surfaces where familiar chemistry could unfold. The combination of factors seemed almost too perfect to be coincidental. Our nearest stellar neighbour, hosting a roughly Earth-sized planet within the habitable zone, represented an extraordinary cosmic gift. The discovery fundamentally altered conversations about interstellar exploration. Before Proxima b, discussions of travelling to other stars remained largely abstract, focused on distant systems we knew possessed planets, but couldn't study in meaningful detail. The Kepler Space Telescope had revealed thousands of exoplanets, but most orbited stars hundreds or thousands of light-years away. Proxima b offered something entirely different, a concrete target, a specific destination that combined genuine scientific interest with relative proximity. The planet transformed interstellar travel from philosophical speculation into something resembling an actual goal, however distant that goal might remain. The timing of the discovery proved significant as well, coinciding with growing technical capabilities in exoplanet characterization. Within years of the announcement, astronomers had begun studying Proxima b's potential atmosphere, searching for signs of habitability or even possible biosignatures. Each new observation refined our understanding while generating fresh questions. Does the planet retain an atmosphere despite its star's violent flares? Is it tidally locked with one face eternally illuminated? Could liquid water pool on its surface, or perhaps exist in subsurface oceans beneath a frozen crust? These questions elevated Proxima b from astronomical curiosity to existential significance. For the first time in human history, we knew of a specific world orbiting a specific star visible to the naked eye where conditions for life might actually exist. To truly comprehend why reaching Proxima b represents such an extraordinary challenge, we must first grasp what 4.2 light-years actually means in practical terms. Light, the fastest phenomenon in the universe, travels at approximately 300,000 kilometers every single second. In 1 year, maintaining this incredible velocity without rest or deviation, light covers about 9.5 trillion kilometers. Multiply that staggering distance by 4.2 and you arrive at roughly 40 trillion kilometers separating us from Proxima Centauri and its tantalizing planet. Human minds struggle with such numbers because we evolved to comprehend distances we could walk, see, or perhaps sail across. Our neural architecture simply lacks the framework for intuiting distances measured in trillions. We resort to analogies and scaled comparisons, attempting to translate cosmic immensity into something our pattern-seeking brains can process. Imagine Earth reduced to the size of a grain of sand. At this scale, the Moon would sit 5 millimeters away, close enough to pinch between your fingers. The Sun would appear as a small marble positioned 2 meters distant. Neptune, at the edge of our solar system, would rest 60 meters away, perhaps across a large room or down a hallway. And Proxima Centauri, at this same scale with Earth as a grain of sand, would be located 500 kilometers away. The distance from London to Edinburgh, from Los Angeles to San Francisco, from Paris deep into Germany. Every probe we've ever launched, every spacecraft that has carried our cameras and instruments to distant worlds has travelled within that room or down that hallway. None have crossed even a fraction of the journey to the neighbouring city that represents Proxima Centauri. This comparison reveals the fundamental mismatch between human achievement and cosmic requirements. Consider velocity instead of distance for another perspective on the challenge. A commercial airliner cruises at roughly 900 km per hour. At that speed, a flight to Proxima Centauri would require 5 billion years, longer than Earth has existed as a planet, longer than multicellular life has flourished in our oceans. Even travelling at the speed of the International Space Station, which orbits Earth at 28,000 km per hour, the journey would still consume over 160 million years. The fastest spacecraft humans have ever built reaches speeds of nearly 200,000 km per hour during its closest solar approaches. Impressive by any terrestrial standard, yet at that velocity, the trip to Proxima Centauri would still require over 25,000 years. These comparisons reveal an uncomfortable truth that extends far beyond simple engineering challenges. The distances between stars exist on scales so divorced from human experience that our fastest machines might as well be standing completely still. We measure spacecraft velocities in kilometers per second, celebrating each incremental improvement in propulsion efficiency. But cosmic distances demand velocities measured in significant fractions of light speed, percentages rather than mere kilometers per second. This fundamental mismatch between our capabilities and the requirements of interstellar travel defines the central challenge facing anyone who dreams of reaching Proxima b, Voyager 1, humanity's most distant. Ambassador, launched in 1977, illustrates this challenge with sobering clarity. This remarkable spacecraft travels through space at 17 kilometers per second, a velocity that seems impossibly fast by terrestrial standards. That translates to over 61,000 kilometers per hour, fast enough to circle Earth's equator in less than 40 minutes. By any measure we use in daily life, Voyager 1 moves with staggering speed, racing through the void faster than any object humanity has ever sent into the cosmos. Yet despite nearly 5 decades of continuous travel, despite covering more distance than any other human-made object in history, Voyager 1 has barely begun to scratch the surface of interstellar space. The probe crossed into interstellar territory in 2012, becoming the first human artifact to leave the heliosphere, that bubble of charged particles blown outward by our Sun. This achievement, celebrated worldwide, marked a genuine milestone in exploration. But the celebration must be tempered with sobering perspective. Voyager 1 now sits roughly 24 billion kilometers from Earth, a distance that sounds impressive until you realize it represents merely 0.002 light-years. After 47 years of relentless travel, the probe has covered 2/1000ths of a single light-year. At its current velocity, Voyager 1 would require approximately 76,000 years to cover the 4.2 light-years to Proxima Centauri. And that assumes the spacecraft were actually headed in that direction, which it isn't. Voyager 1 is travelling toward the constellation Ophiuchus, nowhere near our target star. Even if we could somehow redirect it mid-flight, everyone alive today would be separated from the probe's arrival by 3,000 human generations. Civilizations would rise and fall. Our current languages would evolve beyond recognition. The technological society that built Voyager would seem as distant to the people, witnessing its arrival as the first agricultural settlements appear to us today. The probe carries its famous golden record, an artifact meant to introduce humanity to any intelligent beings who might encounter it. The record contains sounds and images from Earth, greetings in dozens of languages, music spanning cultures and centuries. It represents a beautiful gesture, a message in a bottle cast into the cosmic ocean. But the sobering reality remains that Voyager 1 will drift through the galaxy for millions of years before having even a remote chance of passing near another star system. To visit Proxima b within a single human lifetime, our spacecraft would need to achieve velocities that dwarf anything we've ever accomplished. Let's consider what within a human lifetime actually means for interstellar travel. If we're generous and assume a century, longer than most people live but not impossibly so, we need to cover 4.2 light-years in 100 years. This requires sustained velocities of roughly 4% the speed of light, or about 12,000 kilometers per second. That's over 700 times faster than Voyager 1, our current speed record holder. But a century remains uncomfortably long for a mission timeline. The scientists and engineers who design and launch such a mission would never witness its success. The political will to fund decades-long projects with no immediate returns proves notoriously difficult to maintain across changing administrations and shifting priorities. So let's be more ambitious and aim for a 50-year journey, still longer than most careers, but short enough that some who launch the mission might live to see its arrival. Now we need velocities around 8% light speed, or 25,000 kilometers per second. We've increased the challenge substantially, requiring speeds over 1,400 times what Voyager achieves. The most optimistic scenarios imagine even faster transits. A 20-year journey to Proxima Centauri demands velocities approaching 20% light speed, 60,000 kilometers per second. At these speeds, relativistic effects begin to matter. Time dilation becomes noticeable, though not dramatic. The spacecraft experiences slightly less elapsed time than observers on Earth. But achieving such velocities requires confronting challenges that extend far beyond simply building bigger rockets or more efficient engines. Consider the energy requirements alone. Kinetic energy scales with the square of velocity, meaning that doubling your speed requires 4 times the energy, tripling it requires 9 times the energy, and so forth. At 20% light speed, even a small probe carries kinetic energy equivalent to thousands of nuclear weapons. All that energy must come from somewhere, either carried as fuel, gathered en route, or beamed from external sources. Each approach presents formidable obstacles that compound the already staggering technical requirements. The speed requirements also create secondary problems that make the challenge exponentially more difficult. At these velocities, interstellar dust and gas, normally harmless, transform into a deadly hail of projectiles. A grain of sand encountered at 20% light speed hits with the force of an exploding grenade. Even individual atoms become dangerous at such speeds, carrying energy equivalent to rifle bullets. Shielding becomes essential, but shielding adds mass, which requires more energy to accelerate, which demands more fuel or more powerful propulsion systems. Navigation at such speeds presents its own unique challenges. At 60,000 kilometers per second, you cover the distance from Earth to the Moon in just 6 seconds. Course corrections must be planned far in advance, because any deviation from the intended path compounds rapidly over interstellar distances. Communications with Earth take years, making real-time guidance impossible. The spacecraft must operate autonomously, executing a mission plan developed years or decades before launch, with no possibility of adapting to unexpected discoveries or obstacles encountered along the way. The fundamental mathematics of spaceflight, encapsulated in Tsiolkovsky's rocket equation, reveals why conventional propulsion methods fail so spectacularly for interstellar travel. Formulated over a century ago by Russian scientist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, this elegant equation describes the relationship between a rocket's velocity change, the speed at which it expels propellant, and the ratio of its initial mass to final mass. The equation itself appears deceptively simple, but its implications for interstellar missions prove devastating. As the desired velocity increases, the required fuel grows exponentially, not linearly, but exponentially, creating demands that quickly become absurd beyond any reasonable engineering capability. Consider what this means in practical terms for reaching Proxima b. To achieve even modest velocity changes using chemical rockets, you need to carry fuel, but fuel has mass, which means you need more fuel to accelerate that fuel, which adds more mass, which requires even more fuel in a vicious mathematical spiral. For journeys within our solar system, this proves manageable. We can launch spacecraft to Mars or Jupiter by accepting that most of the launch mass consists of fuel, with the actual payload representing a small fraction of the total. But interstellar velocities break this delicate balance completely. To reach even 1% of light speed using conventional chemical propulsion, the fuel requirements become genuinely absurd. For every single kilogram of spacecraft, you would need roughly 1,000 trillion kilograms of fuel. That's not a typographical error. 1,000 trillion kilograms per kilogram of payload. To put this in perspective, such a spacecraft would need to carry fuel masses exceeding that of entire mountains, planets, or in extreme cases, multiple Earths for even the smallest probe. The rocket equation's tyranny extends beyond chemical propulsion as well. Even with more efficient propulsion systems that expel mass at higher velocities, the fundamental relationship remains unchanged. You can improve the ratio, make the numbers less catastrophically large, but you cannot escape the exponential growth that defines the rocket equation's iron grip on our ambitions. Nuclear propulsion helps to some degree. Fission or fusion reactions release far more energy per unit mass than chemical reactions ever could. Ion engines that accelerate particles to extreme velocities improve efficiency dramatically compared to conventional rockets. But even these advanced systems cannot overcome the equation's fundamental constraints when targeting velocities measured in significant percentages of light speed. This mathematical barrier has driven propulsion theorists toward increasingly exotic solutions, each more speculative than the last. If you cannot carry enough fuel, perhaps you collect it along the way, leading to concepts like the Bussard ramjet that would scoop up interstellar hydrogen. If carrying reaction mass proves impossible, perhaps you push against something else entirely, inspiring ideas for laser sails driven by external energy sources, or solar sails utilizing photon pressure from our own star. Each approach represents a desperate attempt to circumvent rather than overcome the rocket equation's merciless logic. The equation teaches us a humbling lesson about the universe itself. Physical laws impose mathematical constraints that no amount of engineering cleverness can fully overcome. We can work around these limits, find creative alternatives, exploit loopholes in the assumptions underlying conventional rocketry, but we cannot simply build bigger rockets or more powerful engines and expect to achieve interstellar velocities through incremental improvements. Traditional rocket engines, the workhorses that have carried us to the moon and throughout our solar system, burn chemical fuel to generate thrust. But for interstellar journeys, the fuel requirements become so prohibitively enormous that they enter the realm of physical impossibility. Chemical propulsion works through straightforward combustion reactions where fuel and oxidizer combine, releasing energy that heats expanding gases, which then blast through a nozzle to generate thrust. This technology has powered every human journey beyond Earth's atmosphere, from the mighty Saturn V that carried astronauts to lunar soil to the space shuttles that constructed the International Space Station. Within our solar system, chemical rockets remain our proven, reliable workhorses. The fundamental problem emerges when we examine the exhaust velocities these engines can achieve. The fastest chemical rockets expel their propellant at around 4 to 5 kilometers per second. Impressive compared to the speed of sound, but utterly inadequate for interstellar requirements. Remember that we need final spacecraft velocities of thousands or tens of thousands of kilometers per second to make the journey to Proxima b within reasonable timeframes. When your exhaust velocity is measured in single-digit kilometers per second, reaching final velocities thousands of times higher requires fuel mass ratios that defy not just engineering capability, but physical reality itself. The numbers become genuinely absurd in ways that challenge comprehension. To accelerate even a tiny probe to just 1% of light speed, 3,000 kilometers per second, using chemical propulsion would require a fuel-to-payload mass ratio of approximately 1 quintillion to 1. That means for every single kilogram of spacecraft, you would need 1 billion kilograms of fuel. To put this staggering requirement in perspective, Earth itself has a mass of roughly 6 trillion kilograms. Your fuel supply would need to mass hundreds of times more than our entire planet to propel a 1 kilogram probe to a velocity that would still take over 400 years to reach Proxima Centauri. Even if we somehow solved the fuel storage problem, the logistics of such a mission would prove utterly impossible. Where would you obtain this fuel? Earth's entire mass converted entirely to rocket propellant couldn't supply enough material for a meaningful payload. You couldn't manufacture it, mine it from asteroids, or gather it from anywhere else in our solar system. The fuel requirements exceed the available material resources, not just of Earth, but of multiple planetary systems combined. These calculations aren't theoretical speculation or pessimistic estimates designed to discourage exploration. They emerge directly from the well-understood physics of chemical reactions and rocket propulsion. Chemical bonds between atoms can release only so much energy per unit mass, placing hard limits on exhaust velocities which in turn constrains achievable spacecraft velocities through the rocket equation's unforgiving mathematics. No breakthrough in fuel chemistry, no advancement in engine design, no clever engineering solution can circumvent these fundamental thermodynamic constraints. This is why chemical propulsion effectively reaches the end of its usefulness beyond our solar system. The same technology that carried us to the Moon, that enabled our exploration of Mars and the outer planets, that remains our primary means of reaching orbit today, simply cannot scale to meet interstellar requirements. The gap between what chemical rockets can accomplish and what interstellar missions demand isn't a matter of incremental improvement or better engineering. It represents a fundamental chasm requiring entirely different approaches to propulsion, approaches that push us toward the very edges of known physics and technological possibility. One of the first concessions we must make in contemplating interstellar travel is perhaps the most difficult to accept. Human beings cannot make this journey, at least not with any technology we can reasonably envision. This realization cuts against every instinct embedded in our exploration narratives and popular imagination. We picture astronauts planting flags on distant worlds, human eyes witnessing alien sunrises, boots leaving the first prints in extraterrestrial soil. These images populate our science fiction stories, inspire our space programs, and drive public enthusiasm for exploration. Yet the physics of interstellar travel makes crewed missions vastly more difficult than robotic ones, perhaps impossibly so under any realistic scenario. Human beings require an elaborate support infrastructure to survive even the briefest journeys. We need breathable air, drinkable water, edible food, protection from deadly radiation, comfortable temperatures, and sophisticated waste recycling systems. A human-rated spacecraft must carry or generate all these resources for the entire journey duration. For a 50-year mission to Proxima b, even with perfect recycling that loses absolutely nothing to space, the life support mass accumulates dramatically. Water alone, essential for drinking, hygiene, food preparation and cooling systems, weighs roughly 2 kilograms per person per day. Food, even in the most concentrated form possible, adds substantial additional mass. The habitable volume must be large enough to prevent psychological deterioration during decades of confinement in a tiny metal box hurtling through the cosmic void. Then there's radiation shielding, absolutely critical for survival in interstellar space far from any star's protective magnetic field. Cosmic rays bombard everything continuously, with high-energy particles that damage DNA, increase cancer risk dramatically, and degrade electronic systems over time. Effective shielding requires substantial mass, typically meters of water, polyethylene, or other hydrogen-rich materials surrounding the crew compartment completely. This shielding alone might weigh hundreds of tons, all of which must be accelerated to interstellar velocities and then decelerated at the destination, multiplying the energy requirements beyond any reasonable capability. Compare this nightmare scenario to a robotic probe designed for the same mission. Machines don't need air, water, or food to survive the journey. They tolerate temperature extremes and radiation doses that would kill humans instantly. They don't suffer psychological stress from isolation, claustrophobia, or the knowledge that they'll never see Earth again. A robotic spacecraft can be tiny, perhaps weighing mere grams in the most extreme miniaturized designs, while still carrying cameras, spectrometers, and communication equipment capable of revolutionary scientific discoveries. The mass difference between a human-rated interstellar ship and a miniaturized robotic probe might span 8 or 9 orders of magnitude. When mass directly translates to energy requirements through the rocket equation's merciless mathematics, this difference becomes absolutely decisive for mission feasibility. The journey duration creates additional insurmountable problems for human crews that robotic systems simply don't face. Even at 20% light speed, the trip requires 20 years of continuous travel, long enough for significant aging, potential health complications that cannot be treated in deep space, and crew psychology challenges that no amount of training can fully prepare someone to handle. Slower missions might span entire lifetimes, requiring either suspended animation technologies we don't possess and may never develop, or generation ships where children born during the journey would complete missions their grandparents started. Both scenarios introduce complexities and risks that dwarf the already formidable engineering challenges of interstellar propulsion itself. This harsh reality doesn't represent humanity's failure to reach the stars or some defeatist attitude toward exploration. It represents our intelligence in recognizing that machines can serve as our eyes, hands, and instruments across distances our fragile biological bodies simply cannot traverse. The rovers currently exploring Mars represent no less of a human achievement for being remotely operated. Similarly, probes reaching represent genuine human-accomplished Proxima b woolishment and cosmic exploration, even without carrying human passengers. The discovery, the knowledge gained, the expansion of our cosmic perspective, and understanding of our place in the universe, these remain fundamentally human endeavours regardless of whether flesh or silicon makes the actual physical journey across the interstellar gulf. Ion engines represent a significant advancement over chemical rockets, using electric fields to accelerate ions and generate thrust with remarkable efficiency compared to conventional propulsion. Rather than burning chemical fuel in violent combustion, ion drives ionize propellant, typically xenon gas, stripping electrons from atoms to create charged particles. These ions then pass through electric grids that accelerate them to extremely high velocities before expelling them as exhaust into the vacuum of space. The expelled ions leave at speeds 10 times higher than chemical rocket exhaust, sometimes exceeding 40 kilometers per second. This dramatic increase in exhaust velocity translates directly to improved fuel efficiency through the rocket equation's mathematics, making ion propulsion far more capable for long-duration missions within our solar system. The technology has proven itself in actual deep space missions, demonstrating that ion propulsion isn't merely theoretical speculation. NASA's Dawn spacecraft used ion propulsion to visit both the asteroid Vesta and the dwarf planet Ceres, becoming the first spacecraft ever to orbit two separate extraterrestrial bodies during a single mission. The European Space Agency's Smart 1 mission used ion drives to reach the Moon along an efficient spiral trajectory. Japan's Hayabusa probes employed ion engines for their groundbreaking asteroid sample return missions. These successes demonstrate that ion propulsion represents mature, flight-proven technology that works reliably in the harsh environment of deep space over periods of years. The efficiency gains compared to chemical propulsion are genuinely impressive and have revolutionized certain types of missions within our solar system. The efficiency improvements come with a significant trade-off that limits ion propulsion's applicability to interstellar missions: thrust. Ion engines produce incredibly weak thrust, often measured in millinewtons, roughly equivalent to the weight of a few coins pressing gently on your hand. Dawn's ion engine, operating at full power, generated thrust comparable to the weight of a single sheet of paper. This means acceleration occurs gradually, requiring weeks or months of continuous operation to achieve meaningful velocity changes. For missions within our solar system, this proves perfectly acceptable. You can afford to accelerate slowly when you're not fighting against planetary gravity and have years to reach your destination. But for interstellar missions requiring enormous velocity changes, even ion propulsion's improved efficiency falls dramatically short of requirements. The exhaust velocities, while 10 times better than chemical rockets, remain far too low for achieving the relativistic speeds interstellar travel demands. To reach even 1% of light speed using ion drives would still require fuel masses thousands of times greater than the spacecraft itself. Mission duration calculations suggest an ion-propelled journey to Proxima Centauri would require over 40,000 years, better than chemical propulsion's million-year timescales, but still hopelessly impractical for any meaningful exploration program. The power requirements create additional challenges that compound the fundamental limitations. Ion engines need substantial electrical power to ionize propellant and maintain the accelerating electric fields. This power typically comes from solar panels near the Sun, or radioisotope thermoelectric generators for missions venturing into the outer solar system where sunlight becomes too weak for practical solar power generation. For interstellar missions, solar power becomes completely useless once you move beyond the inner solar system, and current radioisotope generators cannot provide sufficient power for the thrust levels needed to achieve reasonable transit times. Nuclear reactors could theoretically supply enough electrical power, but adding a reactor increases spacecraft mass significantly, which reduces the benefit of the more efficient propulsion system. Ion propulsion represents genuine progress in spacecraft propulsion technology, dramatically expanding our capabilities within the solar system and enabling missions that would prove difficult or impossible with chemical rockets alone. But as a pathway to the stars, ion engines demonstrate how even substantial improvements over conventional technology remain woefully inadequate when confronting the immense scales that separate us from Proxima b and our cosmic neighbours. Nuclear thermal rockets offer another incremental improvement over chemical propulsion, using nuclear reactors to superheat propellant to extreme temperatures before expelling it at higher velocities than conventional engines can achieve. The concept appears straightforward on paper. A nuclear reactor generates immense heat through fission reactions, and this thermal energy transfers to a propellant, typically liquid hydrogen, which expands rapidly and exhausts through a nozzle at impressive speeds. The nuclear heat source can achieve far higher temperatures than any chemical combustion process, allowing exhaust velocities roughly double those of conventional chemical rockets. This improvement translates to better fuel efficiency and reduced propellant requirements for any given mission profile, making nuclear thermal propulsion attractive for ambitious solar system exploration. NASA extensively tested nuclear thermal rocket technology during the 1960s and early 70s under programs like NERVA, the Nuclear Engine for Rocket Vehicle Application. These tests demonstrated conclusively that the technology works in practice, not just theory. Reactors operated reliably in rocket configurations while producing substantial thrust and maintaining reactor stability under the extreme conditions involved. Engine tests successfully generated the predicted thrust levels while controlling the tremendous temperatures that define nuclear thermal operation. The program ended not because of technical failures or insurmountable engineering obstacles, but due to budget constraints and shifting political priorities as the Apollo program concluded and public interest in space exploration temporarily waned. Modern interest in nuclear thermal propulsion has resurged dramatically, particularly for Mars missions where improved efficiency could reduce transit times and payload mass requirements significantly. The technology offers genuine advantages over chemical rockets for deep space exploration within our solar system. A nuclear thermal rocket could potentially cut Mars journey times from 9 months down to 4 or 5 months, reducing crew radiation exposure and psychological stress during interplanetary travel. For missions to the outer planets, the improved efficiency means more scientific instruments and less propellant mass, enabling more ambitious exploration of Jupiter, Saturn, and their fascinating moon systems. The technology represents a meaningful step forward in our propulsion capabilities for solar system exploration. Yet for interstellar missions, even nuclear thermal propulsion proves grossly inadequate when confronted with the velocity requirements for reaching Proxima b. The exhaust velocities, while impressive compared to chemical rockets, still reach only about 9 km per second, far below the thousands of kilometers per second required for reasonable interstellar transit times. Applying the rocket equation to interstellar velocity requirements reveals that nuclear thermal propulsion would still demand fuel masses millions of times greater than the spacecraft payload. Mission durations would stretch beyond 40,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri, improved over chemical propulsion but still spanning timescales longer than recorded human history. The reactor mass creates additional complications that partially negate the efficiency improvements. Nuclear reactors require substantial shielding to protect both equipment and any crew from dangerous radiation. They need sophisticated cooling systems to prevent catastrophic meltdown. The fuel elements must withstand extreme temperatures without failing structurally or losing their nuclear properties. All this infrastructure adds considerable mass that must be accelerated along with the scientific payload. For missions within our solar system, this mass penalty remains acceptable because the performance gains outweigh the added weight. For interstellar missions requiring enormous velocity changes, the reactor's mass becomes a significant burden that partially cancels the efficiency improvements nuclear thermal propulsion provides. Nuclear thermal propulsion represents meaningful progress in rocket technology, potentially enabling faster and more efficient exploration throughout our solar system. But like ion engines and other advanced propulsion concepts we've examined, it demonstrates that even substantial improvements over chemical rockets leave us nowhere near the capabilities interstellar travel demands. The gap between our best nuclear thermal designs and the requirements for reaching Proxima b within human-relevant timescales remains vast and seemingly unbridgeable with any conventional approach to propulsion technology. The variable specific impulse magnetoplasma rocket, developed by former astronaut Franklin Chang Diaz, represents one of the most sophisticated plasma propulsion systems ever designed and tested. Proxima uses radio waves to heat gas, typically argon or hydrogen, to plasma temperatures exceeding 10,000 degrees Celsius. Powerful electromagnets then confine and direct this superheated plasma, channeling it out the back of the engine to produce thrust in a controlled manner. The innovation lies in its variable configuration capability. Operators can adjust the system to produce either high thrust with lower efficiency or low thrust with exceptional efficiency, adapting to different mission phases and requirements. This flexibility makes Proxima attractive for missions requiring both high-thrust maneuvers and efficient cruise phases. The technology has undergone extensive ground testing at Ad Astra Rocket Company's facilities, demonstrating stable plasma generation, magnetic containment, and thrust production matching theoretical predictions. The engine operates for extended periods without degradation, suggesting it could function reliably during the long-duration missions that define deep space exploration. NASA has expressed serious interest in Proxima technology for potential Mars missions, recognizing that the engine's efficiency could dramatically reduce transit times compared to conventional propulsion systems. Proponents suggest it might reduce a Mars journey from 18 months down to just 39 days, a dramatic improvement that would minimize crew radiation exposure and reduce the psychological burden of long-duration spaceflight. For exploring the outer solar system, Proxima offers similar advantages, enabling faster missions with reduced propellant mass requirements. The technology could revolutionize how we approach deep space exploration within our solar system, making previously impossible missions feasible and reducing costs for ambitious planetary science programs. Yet even this sophisticated plasma engine falls hopelessly short when applied to interstellar requirements. Despite its advantages over chemical, nuclear thermal, and even ion propulsion, Proxima would still require roughly 2,200 years to reach Proxima Centauri. The fundamental limitation remains exhaust velocity, which, while higher than previous technologies, still operates far below the velocities needed for interstellar transit. The engine also requires enormous electrical power, tens or hundreds of megawatts for meaningful thrust levels. This power would need to come from onboard nuclear reactors, adding substantial mass to the spacecraft. The power-to-thrust ratio presents another significant challenge, as Proxima essentially converts electrical energy into kinetic energy of expelled plasma. This conversion process, while efficient by rocket standards, still wastes significant energy as heat that must be radiated away through massive radiator systems. For the high power levels needed to generate useful thrust, the radiator systems alone might weigh many tons, and all this mass must be accelerated along with the scientific payload. Proxima represents cutting-edge propulsion technology and may well revolutionize exploration within our solar system. But as a solution for reaching other stars, even this advanced system barely improves upon technologies developed decades earlier. The 2,200-year transit time to Proxima Centauri, while better than previous estimates, still spans a period longer than all of recorded Western civilization. Perhaps no propulsion concept sounds more audacious, or captures the imagination quite like Project Orion, the idea of propelling a spacecraft through space by detonating nuclear bombs behind it in rapid succession. The concept emerged in the late 1950s at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where brilliant scientists including Freeman Dyson and Ted Taylor worked out the mathematics and engineering requirements of nuclear pulse propulsion. The basic design called for a massive spacecraft with an enormous steel pusher plate mounted on sophisticated shock absorbers. Nuclear bombs would be ejected behind the craft at regular intervals, detonating several dozen meters away from the pusher plate. The explosion's energy would strike the plate with the shock, and absorbers would convert this violent impact into smooth forward acceleration. The idea seems utterly insane at first encounter. Riding a continuous series of nuclear explosions sounds like science fiction at its most reckless and dangerous. Yet the underlying physics prove surprisingly sound when examined carefully. Controlled tests using conventional explosives demonstrated that the pusher plate concept actually worked as predicted. Engineers calculated that such a system could achieve exhaust velocities far exceeding any chemical rocket, potentially reaching several % of light speed if fusion bombs replaced fission devices. The project attracted serious attention and substantial funding through the early 1960s, with detailed engineering studies producing surprisingly practical and well-thought-out designs. The spacecraft envisioned in these studies would be enormous, perhaps 400,000 tons with a pusher plate 100 meters in diameter. This massive structure would need to withstand repeated nuclear detonations, requiring robust construction unlike any spacecraft built before or since. The design called for launching roughly 300,000 nuclear devices, ejecting and detonating them in precise sequence over months or years of continuous acceleration. Each explosion would add a small velocity increment, gradually building up to tremendous speeds needed for interstellar travel. With fusion bombs rather than fission devices, Project Orion theoretically could propel a spacecraft to Proxima Centauri in approximately 150 years. This represents genuine progress toward making interstellar travel possible, a mission duration that, while still spanning multiple human lifetimes, begins to approach the realm of feasibility. A generation ship using Orion propulsion could potentially complete the journey with children and grandchildren of the original crew, eventually arriving at the destination star system. The concept sparked serious discussions about multi-generational spacecraft and the social structures needed to maintain such vessels across centuries of travel. But numerous obstacles prevented Orion from ever reaching the launch pad. The Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963 prohibited nuclear explosions in space, effectively ending the project's legal viability under international law. Environmental concerns about launching a nuclear bomb-laden spacecraft from Earth's surface proved insurmountable for public acceptance. The sheer cost of building such a massive vehicle and producing hundreds strain of thousands of nuclear devices were even superpowers' budgets beyond reasonable limits. The political optics of launching nuclear weapons into space, even for peaceful exploration purposes, proved completely unacceptable during the tense Cold War era. Beyond these practical barriers, even Orion's impressive performance falls short of making interstellar travel routine or accessible. 150 years remains an extraordinarily long time, longer than the United States has existed as a nation, longer than the Industrial Revolution has been transforming human society. The engineering challenges of maintaining a spacecraft and supporting a human population across such timescales introduce complexities that may prove as difficult as the propulsion problem itself. If we cannot reach Proxima b within a single lifetime using any conceivable propulsion technology, perhaps the solution lies in accepting journeys that span multiple human generations. If we cannot reach Proxima b within a single lifetime, perhaps the solution lies in accepting journeys that span multiple human generations. The generation ship concept proposes launching a self-contained habitat, carrying hundreds or thousands of people on journeys lasting centuries. The original crew would live out their entire lives aboard the vessel, raise children who never knew Earth, and those children would in turn raise another generation. This cycle would continue until distant descendants finally arrived at the destination star system, completing a mission their ancestors initiated but never lived to see completed. These descendants would reap rewards from sacrifices made generations before their birth, inheriting a new world as their birthright. The concept carries undeniable romantic appeal. Humanity spreading across the stars through dedication spanning centuries, families united by a shared purpose greater than any individual lifetime. Science fiction has explored generation ships extensively, imagining the unique cultures that might develop aboard these isolated worldlets, the social structures needed to maintain cohesion across generations, and the philosophical questions about purpose and identity that would inevitably arise. These narratives capture something fundamentally human about multi-generational projects. Cathedrals that took centuries to build, family businesses passed down through generations, cultural traditions maintained across time. The idea resonates with our deepest instincts about continuity and legacy. But the engineering realities of generation ships introduce challenges that may prove insurmountable with any technology we can reasonably envision. The vessel must maintain a complete closed-loop life support system for centuries without failure. Every molecule of water, every breath of air, Every nutrient in every meal must be recycled with near-perfect efficiency. Even tiny losses compound over generations into catastrophic shortages. A failure rate of just 1% per year means total system collapse within a century. No technology we've ever built maintains such reliability over such extended timescales. The complexity challenges our most sophisticated engineering capabilities. The habitat must provide everything a human population needs, not just survival, but quality of life sufficient to maintain psychological health and social stability across generations of enforced confinement. This means agricultural systems to grow fresh food, manufacturing capability to repair or replace broken equipment, medical facilities to handle everything from routine care to emergency surgery. Educational infrastructure must transmit knowledge across generations, and recreational spaces must prevent the psychological deterioration that comes from permanent confinement in a metal box hurtling through space. The complexity approaches that of maintaining a small town, except this town must function perfectly in the hostile environment of deep space, with absolutely no possibility of external assistance or resupply. Population genetics creates additional concerns that compound the social challenges. A small founding population risks genetic bottlenecks and inbreeding depression over multiple generations. Geneticists suggest a minimum viable population of several hundred individuals to maintain genetic diversity over centuries. But supporting hundreds of people for centuries multiplies the life support requirements and habitat mass proportionally, making the engineering challenge exponentially more difficult. Some have proposed frozen genetic material, embryos or gametes stored for later use to inject genetic diversity, but this introduces complex ethical questions about creating children from stored genetic material generations after the donor's deaths. The social challenges may prove even more daunting than the technical ones. How do you maintain mission cohesion when no one alive remembers Earth or the original purpose of the journey? What prevents social fragmentation, religious schisms, or political upheaval in an isolated society with no external authority to provide stability? How do you preserve technical knowledge across generations when the intermediate generations see no immediate benefit from the long journey and may lose interest in maintaining systems they don't fully understand? These questions touch on fundamental aspects of human nature and social organization that no amount of engineering can fully resolve through technical solutions alone. Unlike the romantic notion of sails catching stellar winds, solar sails actually work through radiation pressure, the physical momentum carried by photons of light. Though photons have no mass, they do carry momentum, and when they strike a reflective surface, they transfer that momentum just as a thrown ball transfers momentum when it bounces off a wall. The pressure is incredibly weak. Sunlight at Earth's distance exerts a force of only about 9 micronewtons per square meter, roughly equivalent to the weight of a single grain of sand spread across an entire square meter. But in the vacuum of space with no friction to overcome, even this gentle pressure can gradually accelerate a spacecraft over time. The concept dates back centuries, with Johannes Kepler speculating about light pressure pushing comet tails in the 1600s. But practical solar sail technology has only recently become feasible through advances in materials science and spacecraft engineering. The sail must be extraordinarily thin and lightweight to maximize the area-to-mass ratio, yet strong enough to survive deployment and maintain structural integrity in the harsh space environment. Modern designs use materials mere microns thick, thinner than a human hair, made from reflective polymers or ultra-thin aluminum. These gossamer structures fold compactly for launch, then unfurl in space to span areas measured in hundreds or thousands of square meters. Japan's Ikaros spacecraft, launched in 2010, successfully demonstrated solar sailing by traveling from Earth to Venus, using only light pressure for propulsion after escaping Earth's gravity well. The mission proved that the technology works in practice, not just theory. The sail deployed successfully, maintained its shape throughout the journey, and provided measurable thrust that gradually altered the spacecraft's trajectory over months of operation. This represented a genuine milestone in space exploration, the first spacecraft to journey between planets using sunlight as its sole propulsion source. The achievement validated decades of theoretical work and small-scale experiments, moving solar sailing from speculative technology to proven capability. Yet for interstellar missions, solar sails face severe limitations that make them inadequate for reaching Proxima b. The radiation pressure drops off with the square of the distance from the Sun, following the same inverse square law that governs gravitational attraction. By the time a solar sail spacecraft reaches Jupiter's orbit, sunlight has weakened to just 4% of its intensity at Earth. In the outer solar system, the pressure becomes negligible for practical propulsion purposes. Beyond the heliopause, in true interstellar space, solar radiation provides essentially no propulsion at all. Any velocity gained must come from acceleration near the Sun, where radiation remains intense enough to provide meaningful thrust. This constraint demands that solar sails accelerate extremely close to the Sun, diving deep into the inner solar system where temperatures soar into the thousands of degrees. The sail material must withstand this thermal inferno without melting, warping, or losing the reflectivity that makes propulsion possible. Even materials chosen specifically for their heat resistance struggle at these extreme temperatures. The spacecraft itself requires sophisticated thermal shielding to prevent its electronics and instruments from being destroyed by proximity to our star's scorching radiation. Even under optimal conditions with enormous sail areas, minimal spacecraft mass, and acceleration trajectories passing as close to the Sun as materials can possibly tolerate, transit times to Proxima Centauri would still stretch between 1,000 and 2,000 years. Solar sails alone cannot solve the interstellar travel problem, supporting roles in more, though they may play complex propulsion architectures. Rather than relying on the Sun's diffuse radiation, laser sails propose using concentrated beams of laser light to push spacecraft to unprecedented velocities. The concept addresses solar sailing's fundamental limitation by replacing the Sun's rapidly weakening light with powerful focused energy beams that can deliver concentrated power across vast distances. Sunlight weakens rapidly with distance from the Sun, providing propulsion only during the initial phase of an interstellar journey. Laser systems, by contrast, can deliver focused energy across enormous distances, potentially accelerating spacecraft continuously over months or years, rather than hours or days near the Sun. The beam remains concentrated and powerful far beyond where sunlight fades to uselessness, extending the acceleration phase and enabling dramatically higher final velocities than solar sails could ever achieve. The physics remains similar to solar sailing, with photons carrying momentum that transfers to the spacecraft when laser light reflects off a specialized sail. But lasers offer crucial advantages over natural sunlight. The monochromatic, coherent nature of laser light allows it to be focused into narrow beams that spread minimally across interstellar distances. Specialized sail materials can be optimized for the specific wavelength of the driving laser, maximizing reflectivity and minimizing absorption that would heat and potentially damage the delicate membrane. Most importantly, the laser array's power output can be scaled to mission requirements, limited only by available energy and engineering capabilities rather than the fixed output of our Sun. The proposed systems would be enormous undertakings requiring international cooperation and sustained commitment. A laser array powerful enough to propel spacecraft to relativistic speeds might span hundreds of square kilometers, either positioned in Earth orbit, on the lunar surface, or at gravitationally stable Lagrange points. Individual laser elements would combine their beams coherently, creating a single focused shaft of light aimed with extraordinary precision at the receding spacecraft. The power requirements stretch into gigawatts, equivalent to multiple nuclear power plants operating continuously. This massive energy consumption would continue for the entire acceleration phase, potentially lasting months as the spacecraft builds velocity. The engineering challenges multiply at every level, from power generation through beam control to the physical structures supporting the entire system. Beam divergence quiescence with distance, even significant technical obstacles that were perfectly focused laser beams spread gradually over interstellar distances due to fundamental diffraction limits imposed by the wave nature of light itself. By the time the beam reaches a spacecraft several light years away, it might have spread across millions of kilometers despite starting mere meters wide. This dilution reduces the intensity and therefore the thrust delivered to the sail, making precise timing and positioning crucial for mission success. Larger apertures on the laser array help reduce spreading, but they require even more: ambitious construction projects and greater international coordination. Targeting precision must be extraordinary beyond anything we've achieved in space operations. The laser must track a spacecraft moving at significant fractions of light speed across distances measured in trillions of kilometers. Any pointing error means the beam misses the sail entirely, wasting precious energy and leaving the spacecraft without propulsion when it needs it most. The spacecraft's position must be known to within meters across light-years of distance, requiring navigation and tracking capabilities far beyond our current systems. Despite these formidable challenges, laser sail technology offers perhaps the most promising path to achieving interstellar velocities within human-relevant timescales. Theoretical calculations suggest that a sufficiently powerful laser array could accelerate small spacecraft to 20% of light speed, enabling transit times to Proxima Centauri of just 20 to 30 years. This transforms interstellar exploration from a multi-generational endeavour into something achievable within a single human lifetime, or at least within the professional lifetime of the scientists and engineers who design the mission. The technology demands enormous infrastructure investment and engineering breakthroughs that push the boundaries of human capability. But unlike some propulsion concepts we've examined, laser sailing doesn't violate known physics or require materials with impossible properties. The challenges are engineering problems rather than fundamental physics barriers. Building a laser system powerful enough to propel spacecraft to relativistic speeds requires infrastructure on a scale humanity has never attempted. Consider the baseline requirements for achieving meaningful interstellar capabilities. To accelerate a small spacecraft to 20% of light speed within a reasonable time frame demands laser power measured in tens of gigawatts, roughly equivalent to the output of 20 to 30 nuclear power plants operating simultaneously. This enormous power must be converted to coherent laser light with high efficiency, focused with extraordinary precision and directed at a target growing more distant every second. The engineering challenges multiply exponentially at every level, from power generation through beam control to the massive physical structures supporting the entire system. The laser array itself would span enormous areas that dwarf any construction project humans have ever undertaken. Individual laser elements, perhaps thousands or tens of thousands of them, would need to be arranged across hundreds of square kilometers to achieve the necessary aperture size for minimal beam divergence. These elements must operate in perfect synchronization, their beams combining coherently to form a single focused shaft of light. Any misalignment between elements, even by fractions of a wavelength, degrades beam quality and wastes precious power. Maintaining this precision across such vast distances, through the thermal variations of space or the structural flexing of lunar installations, presents extraordinary control challenges. Location becomes a critical strategic decision with profound implications for mission success. Earth orbit offers accessibility for construction and maintenance, allowing crews to service and upgrade the system as needed. But orbital stations experience thermal cycling as they pass through sunlight and shadow, causing expansion and contraction that disrupts the precise alignment necessary for coherent beam combination. The Moon's surface provides thermally stable mounting and eliminates concerns about orbital decay, but lunar dust poses contamination risks for delicate optical systems. The Moon's slow rotation also complicates continuous tracking of departing spacecraft. Lagrange points offer gravitational stability without orbital motion, but they sit far from easy resupply or repair operations. Power generation at the required scale demands its own massive infrastructure development program. Solar panels spanning square kilometers might provide power in space-based installations, but even at perfect efficiency, capturing tens of gigawatts requires enormous collection areas and sophisticated power management systems. Nuclear reactors offer higher power density, but introduce thermal management challenges that compound the engineering complexity. The waste heat from reactors operating at these power levels must be radiated into space using massive radiator arrays that might themselves span kilometers. Either approach requires construction projects dwarfing anything humanity has built beyond Earth, demanding new techniques for space construction and unprecedented international cooperation. Cooling the lasers themselves presents another substantial engineering challenge that cannot be overlooked. Converting electrical power to laser light generates considerable waste heat, and high-power laser systems require active cooling to prevent damage to their optical components. In space, heat can only be rejected through thermal radiation, requiring large radiator surfaces to dissipate the enormous thermal loads. The radiators, power generation equipment, structural elements, and laser optics collectively mass thousands or tens of thousands of tons, all of which must be launched from Earth or manufactured from lunar and asteroid materials using industrial capabilities we don't yet possess. The cost estimates prove staggering even by the standards of major infrastructure projects. Conservative projections suggest tens of billions of dollars for even modest laser arrays, with more ambitious systems potentially requiring hundreds of billions of dollars in sustained investment. This approaches the cost of major national infrastructure projects like interstate highway systems, comprehensive renewable energy build-outs, or establishing permanent lunar bases. Maintaining political and financial support for such projects across the decades of construction poses challenges potentially as difficult as the engineering itself. The infrastructure requirements for laser sail technology, while theoretically achievable, demand coordinated effort and sustained investment on a scale that tests the limits of international cooperation and long-term political commitment. Project Breakthrough. Starshot represents the transition from theoretical speculation to actual engineering plans backed by significant funding and coordinated scientific effort. Announced in 2016 by the Breakthrough Initiatives, a program funded by investor Yuri Milner and supported by prominent scientists including Stephen Hawking, Starshot aims to send ultralight spacecraft to the Alpha Centauri system within a generation. The project allocated $100 million for initial research and development, with plans for potentially billions more if the concept proves viable. This represents the first serious attempt to move interstellar exploration from academic papers and conference presentations into actual hardware development and detailed mission planning. The project assembled a distinguished advisory committee, including leading physicists, engineers, and astronomers from institutions around the world. This wasn't a fringe endeavour, pursued by enthusiasts on limited budgets, but a serious scientific undertaking that brought together expertise from particle physics, materials science, laser technology, spacecraft design, and astrophysics. The involvement of respected scientists lent credibility and attracted attention from major research institutions worldwide. Universities and laboratories began dedicating resources to solving specific technical challenges identified by the project, creating a distributed research effort spanning multiple countries and scientific disciplines. Starshot's approach differs fundamentally from previous interstellar mission concepts we've examined. Rather than proposing massive spacecraft requiring revolutionary new propulsion systems, the project embraces extreme miniaturization as the key to making otherwise impossible missions potentially feasible. The core insight recognizes that reducing spacecraft mass by orders of magnitude makes previously impossible energy requirements manageable. A gram-scale spacecraft requires far less energy to accelerate than a ton-scale vessel, and the laser technology needed to propel such tiny craft, while still extraordinarily challenging, falls within the realm of achievable engineering rather than pure speculation. The mission architecture emerged from careful optimization studies that balanced scientific return against technical feasibility. Launch thousands of identical miniature probes rather than a single large spacecraft, accepting that many will fail during the journey, but ensuring some reach the destination. Use ground-based or space-based lasers to push light sails attached to these probes, avoiding the need to carry propellant entirely. Keep the spacecraft simple with basic cameras, minimal sensors, and essential communication equipment, reducing both mass and complexity to absolute minimums. Designed for a flyby mission rather than orbit insertion, eliminating the need for deceleration systems and dramatically reducing energy requirements. This pragmatic approach acknowledges current technological limitations while pushing boundaries where progress seems achievable through sustained engineering effort. The project doesn't assume breakthrough physics or materials with impossible properties. Instead, it identifies what needs to improve in laser power, beam control, spacecraft miniaturization, and sail materials, then assesses whether these improvements fall within plausible development trajectories, given sufficient time and resources. The timeline acknowledges that even with sustained effort and adequate funding, launching the first probes might take 20 to 30 years of intensive development. Starshot has energized the interstellar exploration community, demonstrating that serious people with serious resources are willing to invest in making such missions reality, rather than remaining content with theoretical speculation. The project sparked renewed interest in related technologies, encouraged new research directions at universities worldwide, and showed that interstellar exploration might transition from distant dream to achievable goal within this century. Whether Starshot itself ultimately succeeds in reaching Alpha Centauri or not, it represents a crucial psychological and practical shift in how we approach interstellar exploration. The probes envisioned by Breakthrough Starshot challenge every conventional notion of what a spacecraft should be or contain. These starchips would weigh mere grams and measure just centimeters across, representing a radical departure from traditional spacecraft design philosophy. Conventional spacecraft mass hundreds or thousands of kilograms, filled with redundant systems, heavy shielding, substantial power supplies, and propellant for maneuvering. The International Space Station weighs over 400 tons with its modules, solar arrays, and life support systems. Even small cube satellites representing the cutting edge of miniaturization typically mass several kilograms with their scientific instruments and communication systems. Starshot proposes shrinking spacecraft by 3 to 4 orders of magnitude, creating devices that weigh less than a smartphone and measure roughly the size of a postage stamp. This extreme miniaturization becomes possible only through aggressive simplification that eliminates everything not absolutely essential. A starship carries no propulsion system because the laser sail provides all thrust needed for the journey. No substantial power generation beyond what tiny solar cells or capacitors can provide, just enough to operate during the brief flyby of Proxima Centauri. No heavy shielding against radiation or impacts because the probe accepts that some systems may be damaged during the journey and relies on redundancy through sheer numbers rather than robust individual units. The design philosophy accepts constraints that would doom conventional spacecraft, compensating through mass production and statistical probability rather than engineering perfection. The scientific payload consists of only essential instruments designed using advanced miniaturization techniques available. At the most no larger than those camera perhaps in smartphones, captures images during the Proxima Centauri flyby. Basic spectrometers analyze light from the star and any planets encountered, determining atmospheric composition and surface properties through spectroscopic analysis. Simple magnetometers and particle detectors measure the local space environment around the target system. The entire scientific package might weigh a single gram using microelectronics technology, adapted from consumer devices but hardened for the space environment and radiation exposure. Communication systems present particular challenges at such small scales that push technology to its limits. Transmitting signals across 4 light-years requires either high power or large antennas, but the probe has access to neither luxury. Starshot envisions using the light sail itself as a communication antenna, with embedded optical or radio frequency elements that can focus signals back toward Earth. The data rate would be extremely low, perhaps only a few bits per second, meaning that transmitting even a single high-resolution image might take days or weeks of continuous transmission. The probe must prioritize ruthlessly what data to send, knowing it has limited opportunity and energy to communicate its discoveries back to Earth. Navigation and orientation systems must also fit within the severe mass budget constraints. The probe needs to know its position, orientation, and velocity with sufficient accuracy to point its camera and communication system correctly during the brief encounter with Proxima Centauri. Tiny star trackers, accelerometers, and gyroscopes adapted from smartphone technology, but refined for space applications, provide this awareness. The onboard computer, operating on milliwatts of power, processes sensor data and executes pre-programmed commands without any possibility of real-time updates from Earth due to the communication delays involved. Manufacturing such devices requires pushing semiconductor fabrication and micro-electromechanical systems to their absolute limits. Each star chip essentially becomes a specialized integrated circuit with embedded sensors, minimal computational capability, and communication systems all fabricated on a single silicon substrate. Production would use techniques from the semiconductor industry, potentially fabricating multiple probes on single silicon wafers. This approach enables mass production at cost far below traditional spacecraft, where each vehicle represents a custom-built artifact worth millions or billions of dollars. At 20% the speed of light, 60,000 kilometers per second, these diminutive probes would traverse the vast gulf to Proxima Centauri in approximately 20 years. This velocity represents a quantum leap beyond anything humanity has achieved in space exploration. To put it in perspective, the fastest human-made object, the Parker Solar Probe, reaches speeds around 200,000 kilometers per hour during its closest solar approaches. Impressive until you realise that translates to only about 55 kilometers per second. At 60,000 kilometers per second, a probe would circle Earth's entire equator in less than a second, and cross the distance from Earth to the Moon in just 6 seconds. These numbers challenge our comprehension because they exist so far beyond human experience. We measure our fastest vehicles in hundreds of kilometers per hour, yet interstellar exploration demands velocities measured in significant percentages of light speed itself. Reaching such extraordinary velocities requires acceleration that defies imagination. The Starshot concept envisions laser arrays delivering continuous power for perhaps 10 to 15 minutes as the spacecraft recedes from Earth. During this brief window, the tiny probe must accelerate from essentially 0 to 20% light speed, an acceleration measured in tens of thousands of times Earth's gravity. No human could survive such forces, and even robust mechanical systems would struggle under such extreme conditions. Only because Starshot's probes weigh mere grams with minimal internal complexity can they potentially withstand the acceleration without disintegrating completely. The structural loads involved push materials science to its absolute limits. The energy requirements prove staggering even for such lightweight craft. Accelerating a single gram to 20% light speed requires roughly 300 megajoules of kinetic energy, equivalent NT key to the energy released by several grams of TNT explosive. For a spacecraft weighing even a few grams, you're talking about energy comparable to large conventional bombs, all delivered through laser light pressure over minutes. The laser array must maintain gigawatt-level power output throughout the acceleration phase, while focusing this immense energy precisely on a sail perhaps meters across that's receding at rapidly increasing velocity. The technical precision required approaches the theoretical limits of what engineering can achieve. The acceleration phase presents numerous technical challenges beyond just power delivery that compound the difficulty exponentially. As the spacecraft accelerates, the Doppler effect shifts the laser light's wavelength from the probe's reference frame. The sail must maintain high reflectivity across this changing wavelength spectrum or efficiency drops dramatically, wasting precious energy. The probe's attitude must remain stable throughout acceleration. Any tumbling or misalignment means the sail doesn't catch the laser beam properly, reducing thrust or causing the craft to veer off course. Control systems must operate autonomously, because even at light speed, signals take increasingly long to travel between ground control and the receding probe. Once acceleration ends and the laser shuts off, the probe coasts at its final velocity for the entire 20-year journey. There's no mechanism for further speed changes, no fuel for course corrections, no way to slow down at arrival. The probe becomes a ballistic projectile following whatever trajectory its acceleration phase established. Any errors in the initial aim or perturbations during acceleration cannot be corrected later. Navigation must be precise from the start because there are no second chances in interstellar space. This 20-year transit time to Proxima Centauri, while still longer than most human endeavours, falls within the realm of feasible mission planning. Scientists and engineers who work on the launch might still be active in their careers when data returns. The public attention span, notoriously fickle for long-duration projects, might maintain interest across 2 decades. Most importantly, the physics and engineering required, while extraordinarily challenging, don't violate known physical laws or require materials with impossible properties. Space between the stars, while nearly empty by terrestrial standards, is not perfectly vacant, and at relativistic speeds, even the tiniest particles become deadly projectiles capable of destroying delicate instruments. The interstellar medium contains approximately 1 atom per cubic centimetre on average, mostly hydrogen with traces of helium and heavier elements. In human terms, this represents a vacuum far more perfect than anything achievable in terrestrial laboratories. But for a spacecraft travelling at 60,000 kilometers per second, this tenuous gas becomes a sandblasting torrent capable of eroding materials and destroying electronics over time. The physics becomes sobering when you calculate impact energies at these velocities. At 20% light speed, even a single hydrogen atom carries kinetic energy equivalent to a rifle bullet. A dust grain the size of a bacterium hits with the force of an exploding hand grenade. The Starship's journey to Proxima Centauri would involve countless such collisions, millions or billions of atomic impacts, thousands of dust grain strikes, and potentially dozens of encounters with larger debris particles. Each collision represents potential mission failure for such delicate systems. The damage mechanisms vary by particle size in ways that create cascading problems. Individual atoms and molecules penetrate surfaces, displacing atoms in the spacecraft's materials through collision cascades. Over time, this radiation damage degrades electronics, creates defects in structural materials, and clouds optical surfaces. The cumulative effect resembles accelerated aging, where materials that would last centuries in Earth orbit might, when subjected to relative fail within cystic particle bombardment. Solar cells lose efficiency as their crystalline structure degrades under constant bombardment. Computer chips develop bit errors as cosmic rays create unwanted electrical charges in sensitive transistors. Camera lenses become clouded, reducing image quality progressively throughout the journey. Larger particles cause catastrophic rather than cumulative damage. A dust grain striking the light sail punches clean through the gossamer membrane, leaving a hole that disrupts structural integrity and reduces effective area. Multiple impacts gradually shred the delicate sail material that provides both propulsion and communication capability. If a particle strikes the spacecraft itself, the explosive impact vaporizes components instantly, potentially destroying cameras, sensors, or communication systems in a single catastrophic event. The probe carries no shielding heavy enough to stop such projectiles, because adding protective mass would defeat the entire purpose of extreme miniaturization. Spacecraft designers have attempted to calculate collision probabilities along the route to Proxima Centauri, but the results remain deeply uncertain. The interstellar medium's density varies significantly between regions. Some areas are denser, others more tenuous. Certain trajectories might pass through dust clouds or the outskirts of ancient nebulae, dramatically increasing impact risks. Even through relatively clear space, the probability of mission-ending collisions remains uncomfortably high for any individual probe. A single starship might have only a 10 or 20% chance of surviving the journey completely intact. These survival rates would doom conventional missions that invest billions in single spacecraft. This harsh statistical reality drives Starshot's strategy of launching thousands of probes rather than individual craft. If each probe has a 20% survival probability, launching 5,000 units means roughly 1,000 should reach Proxima Centauri functional. The approach accepts that most probes will fail, destroyed by impacts, damaged by radiation, or crippled by component failures. But even a 10% success rate yields hundreds of functional spacecraft at the destination, providing redundancy that ensures mission success despite individual losses. The strategy transforms the interstellar medium from an insurmountable barrier into a manageable statistical problem, though one purchased at the cost of manufacturing and launching thousands of expendable vehicles. Breakthrough Starshot addresses the attrition problem not through heavily shielded individual craft, but through overwhelming numbers that compensate for expected losses. The approach borrows from nature's reproductive strategies. Think of salmon spawning, where thousands of fish ensure that some survive to reproduce, or dandelion seeds scattered by wind, where mass distribution compensates for low individual success rates. Rather than investing enormous resources into making a single spacecraft robust enough to survive interstellar hazards, Starshot proposes manufacturing thousands of identical probes cheaply enough that losing most of them still leaves sufficient survivors to accomplish mission objectives. The economics of this strategy depend entirely on radical miniaturization and mass production techniques. Traditional spacecraft cost millions or billions of dollars each because they're custom-built one-of-a-kind vehicles. Every component undergoes extensive testing. Engineers design redundant systems to ensure mission success. Quality control operates at aerospace standards where failure rates must approach zero. This painstaking approach makes sense for missions launching a single expensive craft, but becomes unnecessary when you're launching thousands. Starships could potentially be manufactured using techniques adapted from semiconductor fabrication, essentially treating spacecraft production like manufacturing computer chips. A single production run might create thousands of probes simultaneously, each identical to the others, with cost per unit dropping dramatically through economies of scale. If each probe costs thousands or tens of thousands of dollars rather than millions, losing 90% to interstellar hazards becomes economically acceptable. The statistical calculations become straightforward once you accept the mass production approach. If individual probe survival probability is 20%, You need 5 probes to expect 1 survivor. To ensure 10 survivors reach Proxima Centauri, launch 50 probes. For 100 survivors, providing robust data redundancy, launch 500 probes. The numbers scale linearly with desired outcomes. Double the desired survivors, double the launch quantity. This predictability allows mission planners to adjust fleet size based on budget constraints and scientific requirements while maintaining confidence in overall mission success. The approach also provides insurance against unknown hazards that might prove worse than predicted. Perhaps interstellar dust proves denser than current measurements suggest, or unexpected radiation fields damage electronics more severely than models predict. With a fleet of thousands, even if survival rates prove lower than hoped, enough probes should reach the destination to return valuable scientific data. This resilience comes from spreading risk across many vehicles rather than concentrating it in a few heavily engineered craft. The strategy fundamentally changes how we think about deep space exploration, accepting failure as inevitable rather than something to be prevented at all costs. Launch logistics favour this numbers-based strategy as well. A mothership could carry thousands of gram-scale probes, releasing them sequentially as it orbits Earth. Each probe deploys its light sail and ground-based lasers target them individually for acceleration. The staggered launches spread the laser array's workload over weeks or months, rather than requiring simultaneous acceleration of multiple craft. Different probes might take slightly different trajectories, sampling various paths through interstellar space and providing diverse scientific data even as many fail en route. This numbers-based approach transforms interstellar exploration from a single high-stakes mission into something resembling a scientific fishing expedition. Cast a wide net, knowing many attempts will fail, but confident that some will succeed. The strategy accepts failure as inevitable rather than catastrophic, fundamentally changing our relationship with risk in space exploration. Sending tiny probes across interstellar distances solves only half the monumental challenge. These spacecraft must also transmit their precious findings back across the cosmic void, and communication across 4 light-years pushes radio and optical technology to their absolute limits. The signal must travel over 40 trillion kilometers, spreading and weakening according to the inverse square law. By the time a transmission from Proxima Centauri reaches Earth, the signal strength has diminished by a factor of roughly 1, followed by 28 zeros. Detecting such faint signals requires enormous receiving antennas and exquisitely sensitive receivers, capable of distinguishing genuine data from background noise and interference. The Starship's transmitter faces severe constraints that make communication extraordinarily difficult. With only grams of mass available, the probe cannot carry large antennas or powerful transmitters. The entire communication system might draw only milliwatts of power, roughly what a hearing aid battery provides. Conventional radio communication under these constraints seems nearly impossible. The signal would be so weak that even Earth's largest radio telescopes might struggle to detect it against cosmic background radiation and interference from terrestrial sources that constantly flood the radio spectrum. Starshot proposes using the light sail itself as a communication antenna, leveraging its relatively large surface area without adding significant mass. By embedding optical or radio frequency elements into the sail structure, engineers could create an antenna meters across without violating mass budget constraints. The sail could reflect modulated laser light back toward Earth, creating an optical communication channel. Alternatively, radio transmitters could use the sail as a phased array, focusing radio waves into a narrow beam aimed at our solar system with much greater efficiency than omnidirectional broadcasting. Even with an optimized system exploiting every possible advantage, data rates would be extremely low. Transmitting a single high-resolution image, perhaps 10 megabytes of data, might require days or weeks at data rates measured in bits per second rather than the megabits we're accustomed to. Video transmission would be completely impossible given the power and bandwidth constraints. The probe must prioritize ruthlessly, sending only the most scientifically valuable observations, perhaps a few carefully selected images of Proxima b showing surface features or cloud patterns, spectroscopic data revealing atmospheric composition and chemical signatures, measurements of magnetic fields and particle radiation in the Proxima Centauri system. The limited communication capacity severely constrains what science can be accomplished during the brief encounter. Pointing accuracy becomes absolutely critical for successful data transmission. The probe must aim its signal precisely at Earth, across 4 light-years of distance. Even tiny angular errors mean the beam misses entirely, its precious data streaming uselessly into empty space where no one will ever receive it. The spacecraft needs accurate knowledge of its position and Earth's location, accounting for the years of light travel time involved. Star trackers provide orientation reference, but the probe's computer must calculate where Earth will be when the signal arrives, compensating for orbital motion and the signal's finite speed. The calculation becomes complex because Earth orbits the Sun orbits the galaxy, and everything moves during the signal's 4-year journey. Navigation errors that seem insignificant over interplanetary distances become catastrophic when magnified across light years. Receiving the signal on Earth requires dedicated facilities and sustained observation time. Large radio telescope arrays like the Very Large Array or single-dish antennas could potentially detect transmissions if they're listening at the right frequency and pointing in the right direction. Optical receivers using large telescopes equipped with sensitive photon detectors offer an alternative if the probe uses laser communication. Either approach demands sustained observation time and computational resources to extract weak signals from noise, essentially searching for needles in cosmic haystacks. The round-trip communication time to Proxima Centauri spans nearly a quarter-century, a delay that fundamentally changes the nature of exploration. Traditional space missions maintain real-time or near-real-time communication with mission control. Mars rovers face delays of 3 to 22 minutes depending on planetary positions, long enough to prevent joystick control but short enough for daily command sequences and adaptive mission planning. Voyager 1, humanity's most experienced distant probe, currently light time delays of about 22 hours, but Proxima Centauri sits 4.2 light-years distant, meaning signals take 4.2 years to cross the gulf in either direction. This delay eliminates any possibility of real-time control or adaptive mission planning. When the probe reaches Proxima Centauri, 20 years will have passed since launch. The scientists and engineers who designed the mission will be 20 years older, some retired, some deceased. The entire team transformed by 2 decades of life. The political landscape will have shifted through multiple election cycles. Technology will have advanced dramatically. The computers used for mission planning will seem hopelessly obsolete. Yet the probe executes commands programmed years or decades earlier, operating according to plans made by people who may no longer even work in the field. The probe must function completely autonomously during its encounter with Proxima Centauri. Pre-programmed algorithms determine when to activate cameras, which targets to image, how to orient sensors, and what data to transmit. If something unexpected appears, an unanticipated moon, an unusual atmospheric phenomenon, evidence of something genuinely anomalous, the probe can only respond according to its pre-existing decision trees. There's no opportunity to radio Earth asking, "Should I look at this unusual feature?" and receive guidance from mission control. By the time the signal reaches Earth and a response returns, the probe will have passed the system and receded millions of kilometers beyond, its brief observation window closed forever. When the first signals finally arrive back at Earth, they'll reach a world 24 years older than the one that launched the mission. The data will be analyzed by scientists who were students or even children when the probes departed. The cultural context will have evolved. Perhaps public interest in space exploration waxed or waned, funding priorities shifted, or new discoveries elsewhere in astronomy changed what questions seem most important. Yet these delayed observations from a world 4 light-years away will still carry immense scientific value, answering questions posed a generation earlier by people who may no longer be alive to see their curiosity satisfied. This temporal disconnect creates unique psychological and organizational challenges that extend far beyond technical considerations. How do you maintain institutional memory across such timescales when the people who understand the original design decisions are no longer available? How do you preserve the data formats, communication protocols, and analysis tools needed to interpret signals arriving decades after launch? Space agencies must plan for multi-decade continuity, ensuring that future scientists will understand signals sent by spacecraft, designed according to specifications written years before their careers began. The exploration becomes inherently multi-generational, not because the spacecraft carries multiple human generations, but because the mission timeline spans them naturally. What awaits these probes at journey's end remains largely speculative, a planet orbiting a red dwarf star in ways that both tantalize and perplex astronomers. Proxima b circles its star at a distance of just 7.5 million kilometers, far closer than Mercury orbits our Sun. Yet Proxima Centauri is a red dwarf, much smaller and cooler than our Sun, with only about 12% of the Sun's mass and roughly 1/6 of 1% of its luminosity. At its close orbital distance, Proxima b receives approximately 65% of the stellar energy that Earth receives, placing it within the theoretical habitable zone where liquid water might exist on a planetary surface. The planet's mass, estimated at least 1.3 times Earth's, suggests a rocky composition rather than a gas giant, raising the tantalizing possibility of a solid surface with continents, ocean basins, mountains and valleys. But the similarities to Earth likely end there. The orbital period of just 11.2 days means the planet races around its star at tremendous speeds, experiencing a year that lasts less than 2 Earth weeks. This rapid orbit, combined with close proximity to its star, creates conditions radically different from our own planet's measured seasons and stable climate patterns. The stellar environment adds complexity to any speculation about habitability. Red dwarf stars are notorious for violent stellar activity, massive flares that can briefly double or triple the star's brightness, unleashing torrents of X-rays and ultraviolet radiation. Proxima Centauri exhibits such flares regularly, some so powerful they would bathe the planet in radiation doses thousands of times what Earth experiences from solar storms. These energetic events could strip away atmospheric gases over time, erode surface chemistry, and create conditions hostile to any life resembling what we know on Earth. Observations have attempted to detect an atmosphere around Proxima b with mixed and inconclusive results that leave fundamental questions unanswered. Some studies suggest the planet might have retained an atmosphere despite the stellar bombardment, while others indicate it could be a barren rock, its gaseous envelope lost to space long ago. The uncertainty stems from the planet's size and distance, where even our best telescopes reveal Proxima b as merely a point of light whose properties must be inferred indirectly. The magnetic field question remains equally mysterious and crucial for habitability. Earth's magnetic field shields our atmosphere from solar wind and protects surface life from harmful radiation. Does Proxima b generate a similar protective bubble? Red dwarf planets orbiting so close to their stars experience powerful magnetic interactions with stellar magnetic fields that could either enhance a planetary magnetic field or suppress it entirely. What Starshot probes might discover during their brief flyby could revolutionize our understanding of planetary habitability around red dwarf stars. Even if the planet proves sterile, a radiation-blasted rock stripped of atmosphere and water, the data would prove invaluable for understanding how close orbiting planets respond to the violent stellar environment of red dwarfs. Proxima b orbits so close to its star that it's almost certainly tidally locked, with one hemisphere perpetually facing the stellar fire while the other freezes in eternal darkness. Tidal locking occurs when gravitational forces synchronize a planet's rotation period with its orbital period, forcing the same face to always point toward the star. For planets orbiting very close to their stars, tidal locking happens relatively quickly in astronomical terms, perhaps within a few 100 million years. Given Proxima Centauri's age of roughly 4.8 billion years, Proxima b has had ample time to become tidally locked, trapped in this synchronized rotation that creates extreme contrasts. The consequences for planetary climate and habitability prove profound and challenging for life as we know it. The dayside hemisphere receives continuous stellar radiation, never experiencing night or temperature relief. Depending on atmospheric thickness and composition, dayside temperatures might reach hundreds of degrees, potentially hot enough to vaporize water and strip volatile compounds from exposed rock surfaces. The night side, conversely, never receives direct starlight, cooling to extreme temperatures limited only by whatever heat the atmosphere can transport from the day side. Without an atmosphere, night-side temperatures could plunge toward absolute zero, creating a world of temperature extremes unimaginable on Earth, where day and night provide regular temperature cycles. The terminator, that boundary between eternal day and eternal night, becomes perhaps the most interesting region for potential habitability. Here, the star hangs perpetually at the horizon, creating a twilight zone where temperatures might remain moderate between the extremes. Some theoretical models suggest this region could harbour liquid water, even if both the day side and night side prove uninhabitable. Life, if it exists on tidally locked worlds, might concentrate in this narrow band where conditions remain tolerable, adapting to perpetual twilight and the strange geometry of a sun that never rises or sets, but simply hangs motionless in the sky like a fixed beacon. Atmospheric dynamics on tidally locked planets differ radically from Earth's familiar weather patterns. The extreme temperature gradient between day side and night side would drive powerful winds as hot air rises on the day side and flows toward the night side, cooling and descending before returning along the surface in massive circulation cells. These circulation patterns could theoretically transport enough heat to moderate temperatures across the planet, preventing the day side from becoming too hot and the night side from freezing completely. But the efficiency of this heat redistribution depends critically on atmospheric density and composition, factors we can only speculate about currently. The perpetual day and endless night create strange possibilities for surface conditions that challenge our Earth-based assumptions. The day side might feature vast deserts of baked rock, any water long since evaporated and transported to cooler regions. The night side could be covered in ice kilometers thick, representing all the planet's water frozen out of the atmosphere and accumulated over billions of years. Or perhaps a thick atmosphere maintains temperature equilibrium, allowing liquid water across much of the surface despite the locked rotation. These scenarios represent fundamentally different worlds, each with unique implications for habitability and the potential development of life. Tidal locking also affects magnetic field generation in ways that could prove crucial for atmospheric retention. Earth's magnetic field arises partly from our planet's rotation, driving convection in its liquid iron core. A tidally locked planet rotates much more slowly from an inertial reference frame, which might weaken or eliminate magnetic field generation entirely. Without a protective magnetic field, the planet remains vulnerable to stellar wind stripping its atmosphere over geological timescales, gradually eroding whatever gaseous envelope it might have possessed initially. This process could render even potentially habitable worlds sterile over billions of years. Red dwarf stars like Proxima Centauri are notoriously temperamental, unleashing powerful flares that bathe their planets in intense radiation with frequencies and intensities that dwarf anything Earth experiences. These stellar outbursts occur when magnetic field lines in the star's atmosphere suddenly reconnect, releasing enormous amounts of stored magnetic energy in seconds or minutes. The energy manifests as intense bursts of X-rays, ultraviolet light, and charged particles that race outward from the star at near light speed. For Proxima Centauri, observations reveal flares occurring regularly, sometimes multiple events per day, with the largest ones briefly increasing the star's brightness by factors of 2 or 3. The proximity of Proxima b to its star amplifies the danger exponentially. Orbiting at just 7.5 million kilometers, the planet sits well within what would be considered the danger zone around a flare-active star. When a major flare erupts, Proxima b receives radiation doses thousands of times more intense than Earth experiences from even the most powerful solar storms. These events deliver not just visible light, but hard X-rays and ultraviolet radiation capable of breaking chemical bonds in atmospheric molecules and surface materials. The charged particle component, protons and electrons accelerated to high energies, follows close behind, slamming into any atmosphere or exposed surface with devastating force that accumulates over time. The cumulative effect of billions of years of such bombardment shapes the planet's evolution in ways that could prove decisive for habitability. Each flare strips away small amounts of atmospheric gas, the high-energy photons and particles giving atoms and molecules enough energy to escape the planet's gravity permanently. Over geological time, this atmospheric erosion could remove substantial portions of whatever gases originally surrounded the planet. Venus and Mars both experienced atmospheric loss, but their losses occurred gradually over billions of years under relatively gentle solar wind. Proxima b faces far more violent conditions, potentially losing atmosphere orders of magnitude faster than any planet in our solar system. Any potential life on Proxima b would need to contend with this hostile radiation environment in ways that push the boundaries of biological possibility. On Earth, our magnetic field and thick atmosphere shield surface life from most cosmic and solar radiation, creating the stable conditions necessary for complex life to evolve and flourish. Proxima b might lack such protection, forcing any biology to develop extreme radiation resistance or seek shelter underground or underwater, where rock and liquid could provide shielding. Microorganisms on Earth called extremophils can survive remarkable radiation doses, some bacteria withstanding thousands of times the radiation that kills humans. But even these hardy organisms might struggle under the relentless bombardment Proxima b experiences during major flare events. The radiation environment represents just one of many ways red dwarf stars differ from our Sun, challenging assumptions about habitability based purely on temperature and orbital distance. The flares also create operational challenges for any spacecraft attempting to observe the planet. Starshot probes arriving during a major flare event might have their sensitive electronics damaged or destroyed by the radiation pulse. Their cameras could be blinded by intense light, their solar cells degraded by particle impacts, their computer memory corrupted by ionizing radiation. Mission planners cannot predict when flares will occur with any precision. Stellar activity follows general patterns, but individual events remain essentially random, making it impossible to time arrivals for optimal observing conditions. Some probes might arrive during quiet periods and capture excellent data, while others encounter the planet during violent storms that compromise their observations entirely. These radiation storms represent one of many ways red dwarf stars challenge our understanding of planetary habitability. Proxima b teaches us that the habitable zone defined purely by temperature tells only part of the story. Behavior matters. Stellar as much as distance when assessing whether worlds can support life as we know it. Whether Proxima b retains any atmosphere at all remains one of the most fundamental unanswered questions about the planet. The combination of tidal locking, stellar radiation, and the star's violent youth may have stripped away any gaseous envelope long ago, leaving behind a barren world exposed to the vacuum of space. The question sits at the heart of the planet's habitability prospects and represents one of the primary scientific objectives for any future mission. Without an Proxima b would be a sterile atmosphere. Rock, its surface exposed directly to stellar radiation, and extremes of the temperature eternal day and night. Water, if it ever existed on the surface, would either freeze solid on the night side or sublimate directly to vapor on the day side, escaping to space molecule by molecule over geological time. Any hope for life would be extinguished by the harsh conditions. Detecting an atmosphere around such a distant planet proves extraordinarily difficult with current technology, pushing our observational capabilities to their absolute limits. Astronomers have attempted multiple approaches using the most sophisticated instruments available. Transit spectroscopy, which analyzes starlight filtering through a planet's atmosphere as it passes in front of its star, might reveal absorption signatures from atmospheric gases. But Proxima b's orbit doesn't necessarily align to produce transits visible from Earth, and even if it does, the signals would be incredibly faint and difficult to distinguish from instrumental noise. Other methods examine how stellar light reflects off the planet or look for thermal emission from the day side, but all require instruments at the very edge of current capabilities. Some observations have hinted at possible atmospheric signatures, but results remain ambiguous and contested among researchers. One study suggested the planet might have lost its atmosphere early in its history, when Proxima Centauri was younger and even more violently active. Young red dwarfs experience a prolonged period of intense magnetic activity and flare storms, potentially lasting hundreds of millions of years. Any planet forming around such a star would endure this hostile environment during its youth, when atmospheres remain most vulnerable, and planetary magnetic fields might not yet have fully developed. The atmospheric stripping during this early period could prove decisive for long-term habitability. The atmospheric retention problem depends on multiple competing factors that make predictions uncertain. Planet mass matters significantly, as more massive planets have stronger gravity that helps retain atmospheric gases against stellar wind stripping. Proxima b's mass, at least 1.3 Earth masses, provides some advantage in this regard. Magnetic fields, if present, create protective bubbles that deflect charged particles that would otherwise strip atmosphere directly. The strength and geometry of any magnetic field around Proxima b remains completely unknown, representing a crucial gap in our understanding. Atmospheric composition also plays a crucial role in retention. Lighter gases like hydrogen and helium escape more easily than heavier molecules like carbon dioxide or nitrogen. The initial atmospheric composition, determined by the planet's formation history, could prove decisive for long-term survival. Theoretical models produce divergent predictions about atmospheric survival around red dwarf stars. Some calculations suggest Proxima b could have retained a thick atmosphere despite billions of years of stellar bombardment, particularly if it formed with abundant volatiles and developed a protective magnetic field early in its history. Other models indicate that red dwarf planets at such close orbital distances inevitably lose their atmospheres over geological time, regardless of initial conditions. The truth likely depends on details we cannot yet observe directly. A definitive answer requires direct observation from spacecraft capable of measuring atmospheric properties in situ. Starshot probes flying through the Proxima Centauri system could detect atmospheric presence through several methods, observing how starlight scatters or refracts near the planet's limb to reveal whether gas surrounds the world. Even negative results, seeing a sharp, airless horizon, would provide invaluable scientific information about atmospheric survival around the galaxy's most common type of star. The data would inform our understanding of habitability around red dwarfs throughout the cosmos. Even if Proxima b proves entirely sterile, devoid of atmosphere and life, the scientific return from successfully reaching and studying it would be immeasurable beyond current understanding. The search for extraterrestrial life drives much public enthusiasm for exoplanet exploration and captures media attention worldwide. But astrobiology represents only one of many profound questions that direct observation of Proxima b could answer definitively. Understanding how planets form, evolve, and respond to their stellar environments remains fundamental to planetary science and our comprehension of cosmic evolution. Every new world we study adds crucial data points to our understanding of planetary diversity and the physical processes shaping rocky worlds throughout the universe. Proxima b offers a unique laboratory for studying planetary evolution around red dwarf stars, the most abundant type of star in our galaxy. Roughly 70% of all stars are red dwarfs, meaning that understanding planets in these systems tells us about the majority of potentially habitable real estate in the Milky Way and beyond. If red dwarf planets systematically lose their atmospheres or suffer sterilization from stellar flares, this dramatically reduces the number of worlds where life might arise naturally. Conversely, if Proxima b retains a thick atmosphere and temperate conditions despite its hostile environment, billions of similar worlds throughout the galaxy might also remain habitable. The implications extend far beyond a single planet to our understanding of life's prevalence in the universe. The planet's geological history would provide invaluable information regardless of biological considerations. How does tidal locking affect a planet's internal heat engine and geological activity? Does the permanent day-night temperature gradient drive unusual tectonic patterns or volcanic activity that differ from Earth's processes? What happens to water distribution on a tidally locked world? Does it concentrate on the night side as ice, in equatorial regions as liquid, or escape to space entirely over time? These questions touch on fundamental planetary processes applicable to countless worlds beyond our solar system. Atmospheric science, if Proxima b retains an atmosphere, would benefit enormously from direct measurements that no Earth-based telescope can provide. How do extreme temperature gradients between dayside and nightside drive circulation patterns? What chemical processes occur when one hemisphere receives continuous radiation while the other remains in perpetual darkness? Can photochemistry in the perpetual daylight create complex organic molecules even in the absence of life? Understanding atmospheric dynamics on tidally locked planets would inform our interpretation of observations from thousands of exoplanets discovered by missions like Kepler and TESS. The magnetic field question carries implications extending far beyond a single planet's fate. If Proxima b generates a magnetic field despite slow rotation and possibly different internal structure than Earth, this would challenge our understanding of planetary dynamos and magnetic field generation. If it lacks a magnetic field, observing how stellar wind interacts directly with the atmosphere would provide unprecedented data on atmospheric stripping processes relevant to Mars, Venus, and countless exoplanets throughout the galaxy. Even the journey itself would yield transformative science that justifies the enormous effort required. A functioning Starshot probe travelling through interstellar space for 20 years would measure the interstellar medium's properties directly, including its density, composition, magnetic field structure, and particle environment. This data would refine our understanding of the material between stars and the conditions any future interstellar mission must navigate successfully. The technological demonstrations alone, proving that gram-scale spacecraft can survive decades in space, that laser sail propulsion works at relativistic speeds, that communication across light years remains feasible, would open entirely new approaches to deep space exploration. The harsh reality remains that with our current understanding of physics and available technology, reaching Proxima b may never become truly possible for human civilization. Yet this impossibility doesn't diminish the imperative to try, to push against the boundaries that currently confine us to our solar system. Throughout human history, we've confronted seemingly insurmountable barriers and attempted to overcome them anyway, not from delusion about our capabilities, but from understanding that the attempt itself transforms us in fundamental ways. Medieval cathedral builders knew they wouldn't live to see their work completed, yet they laid foundations for structures that would take centuries to finish. The Apollo program pursued lunar landings when computers were less powerful than modern calculators, and materials science couldn't guarantee crew survival. Each generation's impossible dream becomes the next generation's starting point for even greater ambitions. The technical challenges of reaching Proxima b, the energy requirements that dwarf our current capabilities, the communication delays measured in years, the hostile interstellar environment, the sheer scale of cosmic distances, all represent real physical constraints, rather than merely engineering problems awaiting clever solutions. We may never develop propulsion systems capable of routine interstellar travel within human lifetimes. The universe may have structured itself in ways that keep stellar civilizations permanently isolated, each confined to their home systems by the vast emptiness between stars that renders travel prohibitively difficult. Physics might impose hard limits we cannot circumvent through any amount of ingenuity, determination, or technological advancement. The rocket equation's mathematical constraints, the speed of light barrier, the energy requirements for relativistic travel, all suggest that interstellar exploration may remain forever beyond practical human reach. Yet, attempting the journey serves purposes that extend far beyond the possibility of arrival at a distant world. The technologies developed for interstellar exploration, advanced materials, miniaturized electronics, powerful laser systems, precision navigation capabilities, find applications throughout society that benefit humanity in countless ways. The international cooperation required to fund and execute such missions builds institutions and relationships that strengthen our collective capacity to address other civilizational challenges from climate change to resource management. The long-term thinking necessary for multi-decade or multi-century projects cultivates perspectives we desperately need for managing existential risks and ensuring human survival. More fundamentally, the attempt affirms something essential about human nature that has driven our species from its earliest origins. This same drive brought our ancestors out of Africa to populate every continent, across oceans to distant islands, and eventually off our planet entirely into the cosmos beyond. Abandoning interstellar exploration because it seems impossible would mean accepting permanent confinement to our solar system, declaring that our cosmic neighborhood extends no further than the Kuiper Belt, that our descendants will never witness alien sunrises or walk on worlds orbiting other stars. The attempt also confronts the Fermi paradox, that troubling silence we observe when searching for signs of other technological civilizations in our galaxy. Perhaps most species reach our level of development and then turn inward, concluding that interstellar space is too vast, too hostile, too expensive to justify the effort required. Perhaps civilizations that accept this limitation eventually stagnate or self-destruct, while those that persist in attempting the impossible occasionally succeed and join some galactic community of explorers we cannot yet detect. We cannot know the truth unless we try to push beyond our current boundaries. Proxima b, with its tantalizing promise of a potentially habitable world orbiting our nearest stellar neighbor, represents more than a scientific curiosity or exploration target. It stands as a test of whether humanity can pursue goals that transcend individual lifespans and immediate returns. Whether we succeed in reaching it or not, the attempt itself, the planning, the technology development, the international cooperation, the sustained commitment across generations, would demonstrate that we've matured enough as a species to think beyond ourselves and our immediate needs. The profound questions surrounding Proxima b extend beyond mere scientific curiosity into the realm of philosophical necessity. When we contemplate this distant world, we're not simply wondering about atmospheric composition or surface temperatures. We're asking whether intelligence can transcend the cosmic barriers that seem designed to isolate every civilization within its own stellar system. The universe appears to have constructed itself as a vast archipelago of stars, each separated by gulfs so immense that even light, travelling at the ultimate speed limit, requires years to bridge the gaps. This isolation may represent more than an engineering challenge. It could be a fundamental feature of cosmic architecture, a built-in constraint that prevents the easy mixing of stellar civilizations. Perhaps the universe enforces a kind of quarantine, ensuring that each world that develops intelligence must first prove its worthiness by overcoming seemingly impossible barriers before joining whatever galactic community might exist beyond our current detection capabilities. The mathematics of interstellar travel force us to confront uncomfortable truths about our place in the cosmic hierarchy. We measure our greatest achievements in kilometers per second, celebrating each incremental improvement in spacecraft velocity. Yet the distances between stars demand velocities measured in significant percentages of light speed itself. This represents more than a technological gap. It's a chasm between human capability and cosmic requirement that may never be bridged through conventional approaches. Consider the energy budget required for even the most optimistic interstellar mission scenarios. Accelerating a single gram to 20% light speed requires energy equivalent to multiple nuclear weapons. Scale that to any meaningful scientific payload, and you're discussing energy requirements that approach the total output of small nations. The infrastructure needed to generate, store, and precisely deliver such enormous energies pushes us toward engineering projects that dwarf anything humanity has ever attempted. The breakthrough starshot concept, while revolutionary in its approach, reveals just how extreme the measures required for interstellar exploration truly are. Even with spacecraft weighing mere grams, even with laser arrays spanning hundreds of square kilometers, even with international cooperation on unprecedented scales, the project represents humanity's absolute maximum effort to send the tiniest possible scientific instruments across the cosmic void. The probe swarms envisioned by Starshot acknowledge a harsh reality about interstellar exploration. Individual missions cannot succeed against such overwhelming odds. Only through sheer numbers, accepting massive failure rates, and relying on statistical probability rather than engineering perfection, can we hope to place even rudimentary instruments in another star system. This represents a fundamental shift in how we approach exploration, moving from precision engineering toward biological strategies of reproduction and redundancy. The communication challenges inherent in interstellar exploration create temporal barriers that may prove as insurmountable as the physical distances involved. When signals take years to cross between stars, the very concept of exploration changes. We cannot guide, control, or adapt our missions in real time. Every interstellar probe becomes an autonomous agent, executing decisions programmed years or decades before launch, responding to discoveries according to algorithms written by people who may no longer be alive when those discoveries occur. This temporal disconnect transforms interstellar exploration from a human endeavour into something more like archaeology in reverse. We launch artifacts into the future, hoping they'll return information to descendants we'll never meet. The scientists who analyse the first data from Proxima b will be separated from the mission's designers by decades of technological evolution, cultural change, and generational turnover. The environmental hazards of interstellar space add another layer of impossibility to an already overwhelming challenge. At relativistic velocities, even the near-perfect vacuum between stars becomes a destructive medium. Individual atoms carry the energy of rifle bullets. Dust grains impact with explosive force. The gossamer structures required for laser sail propulsion must survive this bombardment while maintaining their delicate optical properties across decades of continuous exposure. Radiation damage accumulates relentlessly throughout the journey, degrading electronics, clouding optical surfaces, and disrupting the precise systems required for navigation and communication. Unlike missions within our solar system, where we can design for specific radiation environments, interstellar probes must survive whatever conditions they encounter, with no possibility of repair, replacement, or even diagnostic assistance from Earth. The miniaturization requirements for viable interstellar probes push technology toward its fundamental limits. Every gram of mass multiplies the energy requirements exponentially. Every component must serve multiple functions. Every system must operate flawlessly for decades without maintenance. The engineering tolerances required approach those of atomic-scale manufacturing, where single molecular defects could cascade into mission-ending failures. Manufacturing such devices in the quantities required by Starshot's statistical approach demands production techniques that don't yet exist. We need semiconductor-style fabrication for complete spacecraft, mass production of systems more complex than any consumer electronics, all while maintaining aerospace reliability standards. The economic model assumes cost per unit dropping to thousands rather than millions of dollars, requiring manufacturing breakthroughs as revolutionary as the propulsion technology itself. The targeting precision required for interstellar missions exceeds anything we've achieved in space operations. Aiming a laser beam across light years at a target moving at relativistic speeds demands navigation accuracy measured in meters across distances where our current capabilities struggle with kilometer precision. Any pointing error wastes precious energy and potentially dooms the mission to failure. Ground-based laser systems must track receding spacecraft with unprecedented accuracy, while compensating for atmospheric distortion, platform stability, and the relativistic effects that complicate targeting calculations. The beam control systems required approach the theoretical limits of optical engineering, demanding stability and precision that challenge our understanding of what's mechanically achievable. Power generation for the massive laser arrays represents an infrastructure challenge comparable to building entire cities dedicated solely to interstellar exploration. Tens of gigawatts of continuous power, focused into coherent light beams, sustained for the minutes or hours required to accelerate each probe swarm. The electrical infrastructure alone would strain national power grids, requiring dedicated generation capacity that could otherwise power millions of homes. Cooling systems for such powerful lasers demand their own revolutionary engineering solutions. The waste heat generated during high-power operation must be dissipated without compromising beam quality or system stability. In space-based installations, this means massive radiator arrays. On lunar surfaces, it requires thermal management systems that dwarf any industrial cooling application ever attempted. The political sustainability of interstellar exploration projects may prove as challenging as the technical requirements. Multi-decade development timelines span multiple election cycles, economic recessions, and shifting national priorities. Maintaining funding and political support for projects that produce no immediate economic returns tests the limits of democratic decision-making processes optimized for shorter-term concerns. International cooperation on the scale required for serious interstellar exploration demands diplomatic achievements that may be as difficult as the engineering breakthroughs. Shared control of weapons-grade laser systems, coordinated launch schedules, unified mission objectives, and equitable distribution of scientific returns require treaty frameworks that don't yet exist, and trust relationships that span decades of changing leadership. The scientific return on investment timeline for interstellar exploration operates on scales that challenge institutional memory and continuity. Universities and research institutions must maintain expertise in mission-specific technologies across generations of researchers. Data formats, analysis tools, and communication protocols established at launch must remain viable decades later when results finally arrive. Space agencies face the unprecedented challenge of maintaining institutional knowledge across timescales longer than most organizations' entire histories. The people who design interstellar missions will retire or die before seeing results. The infrastructure required to receive and analyze returning data must be maintained by people who had no role in mission planning, working with technologies that may seem primitive by future standards. Even if we overcome every technical and political obstacle, even if we successfully dispatch probe swarms toward Proxima Centauri, even if some fraction survives the journey and returns data about our nearest potentially habitable neighbor, the information may arrive too late to influence humanity's future in space. Climate change, resource depletion, technological disruption, or civilizational collapse could reshape human society beyond recognition during the decades required for interstellar exploration. The cruel irony of interstellar exploration lies in its timing requirements. By the time we develop technologies capable of reaching other stars, we may have solved or succumbed to the existential challenges that currently threaten our species. The civilizations capable of interstellar travel may be so different from contemporary humanity that their motivations for exploration become incomprehensible to us. Perhaps this represents the ultimate test imposed by the universe's architecture, not whether we can build rockets powerful enough to cross interstellar space, but whether we can evolve societies stable and far-sighted enough to pursue goals that transcend individual lifetimes. The distance to Proxima b measures more than physical separation. It gauges the gap between what we are and what we must become to walk among the stars. The harsh reality of reaching Proxima b forces us to confront fundamental questions about human nature, technological capability, and our relationship with the cosmos itself. We live in a universe that tantalizes us with nearby worlds, while placing them beyond our reach through the merciless mathematics of distance, energy, and time. Every calculation, every engineering analysis, every proposed solution ultimately crashes against the same unyielding barriers. The rocket equation's exponential demands, the inverse square law's dilution of signals and energy, the finite speed of light's temporal constraints. These aren't engineering challenges awaiting clever solutions. They're fundamental features of physical reality that constrain every technological civilization, regardless of intelligence, determination, or ambition. Yet perhaps impossibility itself serves a purpose in the cosmic scheme. The barriers separating us from Proxima b may be selection mechanisms, ensuring that only species mature enough to think beyond themselves, wise enough to cooperate across generations, and patient enough to pursue goals they'll never personally achieve, eventually join whatever community of stellar civilizations might exist in the galaxy's vast spaces. The attempt to reach Proxima b, whether it succeeds or fails, transforms us in ways that matter as much as the destination itself. In pushing against the boundaries of the possible, we discover not just the limits of our technology, but the depths of our imagination, the strength of our cooperation, and the persistence of our hope. As we stand on Earth's surface, gazing up at a star invisible to the naked eye, knowing it hosts a world that might harbour life, we face a choice that will define our species' future. Do we accept the comfortable boundaries of our solar system, content to explore familiar worlds orbiting our own sun? Or do we reach toward that impossible star, knowing the journey may take centuries, knowing we may never arrive, but understanding that the attempt itself makes us worthy of the cosmos that created us? The distance to Proxima b measures more than space. It measures time, energy, cooperation, imagination, and hope. In contemplating that journey, we discover not just whether we can reach other worlds, but whether we deserve to. The numbers surrounding Proxima b tell a story of cosmic mockery. Here sits a world that could answer humanity's oldest question about our place in the universe, positioned at what astronomers call the closest possible location beyond our solar system. Yet that proximity remains an illusion constructed from our limited perspective, a cruel trick played by the vast scales that govern interstellar space. When we examine the true requirements for reaching Proxima b, we encounter a cascade of impossibilities that compound upon each other with mathematical precision. Each solution creates new problems. Every breakthrough reveals deeper barriers. The universe appears designed to tantalize us with glimpses of other worlds, while ensuring they remain forever beyond our grasp through the relentless application of physical law. Consider the fundamental energy problem that underlies every interstellar mission proposal. The kinetic energy required to accelerate even the smallest probe to meaningful interstellar velocities exceeds the total energy output of entire nations. We're not discussing incremental improvements to existing technology, but energy requirements that approach the binding energy of atomic nuclei themselves. The gap between what we can generate and what interstellar travel demands spans multiple orders of magnitude. This energy barrier creates secondary impossibilities that multiply the challenge exponentially. Generating such enormous energies requires infrastructure projects that dwarf humanity's greatest construction achievements. The laser arrays proposed for Breakthrough Starshot would consume power equivalent to large cities while operating with precision that pushes optical engineering toward its theoretical limits. The economic resources required approach those typically reserved for major military conflicts or civilizational infrastructure development. The material science challenges embedded within interstellar exploration push us toward the boundaries of what atomic structures can theoretically support. Laser sails must be thinner than spider silk yet stronger than steel, reflective as mirrors yet flexible as fabric, stable across decades yet light enough to accelerate under photon pressure. These requirements exist at the intersection of multiple physical limits, demanding materials that may not be possible to manufacture regardless of technological advancement. Navigation precision for interstellar missions requires accuracy that makes our most sophisticated space operations look crude by comparison. Pointing errors measured in microradians become catastrophic failures when magnified across light years. The targeting systems needed to guide laser beams across interstellar distances while tracking relativistic spacecraft demand stability and precision that challenge our understanding of what mechanical systems can achieve in practice. The communication barriers separating Earth from Proxima b create informational paradoxes that may prove as insurmountable as the physical distances involved. We must design missions for discoveries we cannot predict, program responses to scenarios we cannot imagine, and maintain technological compatibility across timescales that span multiple generations of equipment obsolescence. The returning data arrives in a world that may no longer possess the infrastructure or expertise needed to interpret it properly. Even the most optimistic scenarios for reaching Proxima b demand sacrifices that test the limits of what any civilization can reasonably attempt. The resources required could instead address existential challenges facing humanity today: climate change, pandemic preparedness, asteroid defense, nuclear proliferation, artificial intelligence safety. The opportunity cost of interstellar exploration approaches the total capacity of human civilization to address the problems threatening our immediate survival. The temporal scales involved in interstellar exploration create philosophical paradoxes that extend beyond technical considerations. The people who would benefit from discoveries at Proxima b remain separated from mission planners by decades or centuries. We're asking current generations to sacrifice resources for knowledge that will benefit strangers living in futures we cannot predict. This intergenerational burden sharing represents a form of social cooperation that has no precedent in human history. The psychological barriers to interstellar exploration may prove as formidable as the physical ones. Human motivation typically operates on scales measured in years or decades, not centuries or millennia. Maintaining enthusiasm for projects that produce no results within individual lifetimes requires cultural evolution toward forms of patience and delayed gratification that challenge fundamental aspects of human nature. Political systems optimized for electoral cycles and immediate benefits accrue across returns struggle to support projects whose geological timescales. The institutional stability required for multi-missions exceed centuries, the lifespan of most governments, corporations, and even civilizations throughout recorded history. We're attempting to coordinate efforts across timescales longer than the entire history of organized human society. The risk profile of interstellar exploration defies conventional analysis. Unlike terrestrial projects where failure means wasted resources and delayed progress, interstellar mission failures represent decades of development, billions in investment, and irreplaceable launch windows lost forever. The consequences of failure extend beyond any single generation, potentially setting back interstellar exploration by centuries. Success probability calculations for interstellar missions reveal uncomfortable truths about the nature of cosmic exploration. Even optimistic estimates suggest individual probe survival rates below 50%. Mission success depends on statistical approaches that accept massive failure rates as inevitable rather than problems to be solved. This represents a fundamental shift from precision engineering toward biological strategies of reproduction and redundancy. The environmental hazards of interstellar space create a gauntlet of destruction that may be impossible to survive, regardless of engineering sophistication. Cosmic radiation accumulated over decades, interstellar dust impacts at relativistic velocities, magnetic field interactions, temperature extremes, and vacuum exposure combine to create conditions more hostile than any terrestrial analogue. The cumulative damage from 20 years in interstellar space may exceed what any manufactured system can withstand. Manufacturing requirements for viable interstellar probes demand production techniques that exist at the intersection of multiple impossible technologies. Mass production of gram-scale spacecraft, semiconductor fabrication of complete scientific instruments, aerospace reliability and consumer electronics form factors. Each requirement pushes existing manufacturing capabilities beyond their current limits, demanding breakthroughs in multiple fields simultaneously. Tonight we've journeyed through the mathematics of impossibility, confronted the cruel deception of cosmic proximity, and witnessed how the universe places its most tantalizing prizes just beyond our reach. Proxima b sits there in the darkness, a world that might answer our deepest questions about life in the cosmos, yet separated from us by barriers so fundamental they may never fall to human ingenuity. The harsh reality is that reaching our nearest potentially habitable neighbour represents not just an engineering challenge, but a confrontation with the very architecture of reality itself. Perhaps that impossibility teaches us something profound about our place in the universe, reminding us that some dreams are meant to inspire rather than fulfill, pushing us to become worthy of the stars even if we can never touch them.